Chapter 680. Xiantian Sect. Chun Chongxing stood at the edge of the cliff, looking at Chun Xianfeng in the air, and shouted, "Father!" Hearing Chun Chongxing's call, Chun Xianfeng slowly turned around and asked, "What's the matter?" Chun Chongxing pursed his lips and said to Chun Xianfeng, "Father, I've been thinking about this for a long time, but I still don't understand why you would recommend me to be the reserve heir of Kunlun's heir and not him." The him Chun Chongxing was referring to was his brother Chen Aochu. Originally, Chun Chongxing thought Chun Xuanfeng's recommendation would definitely go to Chen Aochu, but he didn't expect it to fall into his lap. He really couldn't understand it. Hearing Chun Chongxing's question, Chun Xianfeng smiled and replied, "You haven't seen your grandfather recently. Don't you think it's strange?" Hearing this, Chun Chongxing's expression changed abruptly. He cried out involuntarily, "Could it be that my quota is grandpa's? You're wrong." Chun Xianfeng shook his head and explained, "Your grandfather has reached the nascent soul stage, and he helped you get the recommendation." Grandfather reached the nascent soul stage? Chun Chongxing was overjoyed. Is this true? Of course it's true. Otherwise, this recommendation wouldn't fall into your lap. Chun Xianfeng slowly walked to Chun Chongxing and said, "You're my son, and also the most outstanding genius of Xiantian Sect. As your father, I'm sorry for what happened in the past, but from now on, you won't be wronged in any way." Originally, Chun Xianfeng was the only nascent soul stage cultivator in Xiantian Sect. In order to take care of the feelings of the old sect master, Chun Xianfeng had always treated Chun Chongxing coldly. On one hand, it was to calm the people down, and on the other hand, it was to protect Chun Chongxing. However, things were different now. Anan had advanced to the nascent soul stage and became the second nascent soul stage cultivator in the Xiantian Sect. As Anan's only relative in this world, Chun Chongxing's status in the Xiantian Sect naturally rose. The first thing Anan did after his advancement was to ask for a recommendation for Chun Chongxing. It was not only to seek benefits for Chun Chongxing, but also to establish his authority in front of everyone. In the case where Chun Xianfeng did not oppose, naturally, no one would jump out to provoke Anan. After hearing Chun Xuanfeng's explanation, Chun Chongxing's heart was naturally very happy, but then there was a question. Where did Anan go after advancing to the nascent soul stage? In response to Chun Chongxing's question, Chun Xianfeng chuckled and explained, "Senior brother went to the Starry Dragon Steel." The birth of another nascent soul stage cultivator in the Black Heaven sect is a huge matter. Naturally, he should be nominated on the Starry Dragon Steel. The first elder of the Xiantian sect, Nan, had advanced to the nascent soul stage. In just a few short months, the Star Dragon Federation had gained another nascent soul cultivator, shocking the world. For a time, countless forces sent people to the Black Heaven sect in Star Dragon City with congratulatory gifts to send their blessings. As one of the top 10 sects, the Black Heaven sect's reputation soared and became the hot topic of discussion. On the flying ship, when Qin Chuan saw the news about the Black Heaven sect, he finally understood why Chun Xianfeng suddenly appeared in the Black Moon Combat Academy and took Chun Chongxing away. It turned out that Chun Chongxing had a powerful backer. Currently, the Black Heaven sect had a total of 2 nascent soul cultivators. One of them was Chun Chongxing's father, and the other was Chun Chongxing's grandfather. In the Black Heaven sect, Chun Chongxing could be said to be the most respected person besides these two. Now, even if Chen Aochu was given 10 guts, he still wouldn't dare to provoke Chun Chongxing. Chongxing has been sullen for so many years, and now he can finally hold his head high. Qin Chuan smiled at Lu Zi and said, "I guess this kid must be living a good life now." Lu Zi giggled. "From what I know about Chun Chongxing, he's definitely the kind of person who thinks of ways to live a good life. By the way, how much do you know about the preparatory air test?" Qin Chuan asked curiously. "Are you confident that you can pass the test?" Lu Zi nodded and said to Qin Chuan, "It said that the preparatory air test isn't a cosmic relic. However, it's not a cosmic relic that we're familiar with. It's a cosmic relic that only the preparatory air test and above are qualified to enter." Hearing Lu Zi's words, Qin Chuan nodded gently and asked, "How many people from the Star Dragon Federation will participate in this test?" This is also one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. Luzi looked at Qinchuan with a subtle gaze and said, "For this test, the human race and the demon race will participate together. We won't be separated." Qinchuan was a little surprised. "Participate together?" Luzi nodded and said, "Just like in the Carefree Secret Realm, the two races will participate together. In fact, you should also know that the hatred between the human race and the demon race is ultimately a dispute of interests. Perhaps in the hearts of ordinary people, the demon race is an unforgivable existence. But in the hearts of the higher-ups and most cultivators, the demon race is actually also cultivators. We are human cultivators, and they're demon cultivators." Qinchuan understood what Luzi said, and he knew more than Luzi. Because of the reappearance of Zerg, the war between the Star Dragon Federation and the demon race had already stopped. Both sides have begun to properly deal with some of the recent conflicts, trying to ease the conflict between the two sides as much as possible, because when Zerg reappears, they may have to join forces to fight against Zerg. Some of the current conflicts may become fatal hidden dangers at that time, so the sooner they deal with them, the better. There are many cosmic relics that can't be explored by the human race alone, so we have to join forces with the demon race. In fact, in the various teams set up by the preparatory air test, basically the human race and the demon race are mixed together. There are very few teams that only have one race. Speaking of this, Luzi paused for a moment and then said, "Maybe you can form a team with Yaorao." Hearing Luzi mention Yaorao, Qinchuan's face couldn't help but reveal a gentle smile. These days he hadn't seen Yaorao, so he really somewhat missed Yaorao. Seeing the smile on Qinchuan's face, Luzi felt somewhat lost in her heart, and the expression on her face also became somewhat lonely. "Qinchuan, do you know? Sometimes, I really wish you were a scumbag." Hearing Luzi's words, Qinchuan was somewhat confused. Why would she want him to be a scumbag? Seeing the confused expression on Qinchuan's face, Luzi gnashed her teeth and said, "What are you looking at?" Finished speaking, Luzi got up and angrily walked towards the direction of the bedroom. This made Qinchuan somewhat confused. What the hell is going on? Not far away, seeing this scene, Bayu's clear and cold eyes flashed with a touch of complex color. She had always been very good at concealing her emotions, but when facing things related to Qinchuan, her heart would always be in a mess. She didn't like this kind of feeling, but she couldn't control herself. Chapter 681. Coming to Star Dragon City again. Qinchuan's mood was completely different from the last time. The last time he came to Star Dragon City, he was still a young man who didn't know much about anything. He only knew how to be competitive and win every match, winning the cheers and applause of the audience. Now, coming to Star Dragon City again, he was still a young man, but he had experienced too many storms and hardships. He had become mature and steady. He was no longer a hothead who rushed forward bravely. Star Dragon City is still Star Dragon City. Nothing has changed, but we're different. We've changed too much. Qinchuan wasn't the only one who felt this way. LVZ also felt the same way. Back then, she was still a burden to the team. But now, she had become the mainstay of the team. She liked this change very much. She hated herself for not being able to help at all. It was too embarrassing. As soon as Qinchuan and the others walked out of the airport, the staff responsible for receiving them came up to them. "Everyone, I'm Qi-1, the receptionist of the Air Center of the Star Dragon Federation. I was sent here to receive you." The polite Qi-1 stood in front of Qinchuan and the others, looking very respectful. He carefully observed Qinchuan and the others from the corner of his eyes. He didn't find anyone who looked like a cultivator in the advanced stage of the nascent soul realm, which made him relax a lot. "Hello." Qinchuan smiled at Qi-1 and asked, "Where's the air center you mentioned?" Qinchuan wasn't the only one who was curious about this so-called air center. The others were the same. Although they knew that someone would be waiting for them here, this was the first time they had heard of the air center. Qi-1 smiled and explained to the others, "The so-called air center is a place that provides all kinds of high-quality services for the heirs. The heirs fight in the ruins of the universe all year round. Naturally, They can't do everything by themselves, so the air center is here. You can also think of it as a logistics base for the heirs. It mainly provides resources for the heirs, such as repairing battlesuits. Hearing Qi Wen's explanation, the others couldn't help but look enlightened. So this was the air center. Then please take us to the air center. Qin Chuan smiled at Qi Wen and said, "Other than us, how many people will come today?" Hearing this, Qi Wen said to Qin Chuan, "As far as I know, there will be more than 100 outstanding geniuses arriving at the air center today. About 90% of them will take the test. The rest have letters of recommendation and can directly become candidates." Qin Chuan nodded slightly and didn't ask any more questions. The group followed Qi Wen and boarded the flying ship that had come to receive them. The flying ship looked very ordinary, and there was nothing special about it. However, Qin Chuan wasn't afraid that Qi Wen was a bad guy sent by some forces to frame them, because Hui Tong was watching them from the sky. If he found anything wrong, Hui Tong would immediately attack. After boarding the airship, Qi Wen began to introduce the air center to everyone in detail. The air center would provide all sorts of cultivation resources to the heirs for free. The more common ones, such as special nutrition potions and special healing potions, were free and unlimited. The more precious ones, on the other hand, required the heirs to exchange for them with contribution points. As for how to earn contribution points, Qi Wen couldn't tell Qin Chuan and the others yet, because this was something they would only know after becoming a candidate heir. It was also worth mentioning that the Center of Heirs was absolutely safe. Since the establishment of the Center of Heirs, there had only been one incident where an heir had been killed. After that incident, the powerful force that had attacked the heir was directly uprooted and everyone related to it was executed. After that incident, all the forces regarded the Center of Heirs as a forbidden area. No one dared to mess around in the Center of Heirs. In short, the heir could die, but only in the process of exploring the ruins of the universe. Qin Chuan was quite satisfied with this. As long as those who wanted to deal with him could not mess around in the air center, then he had nothing to be afraid of. After all, only those who had become heirs could enter the universe relic, and most of the heirs were young people. If these people wanted to harm him, they had to weigh their own abilities. Just as everyone was chatting, another newcomer boarded the flying ship. It was Qin Chuan's old acquaintance, Yi Qingning of the Yi family. Yi Qingning was wearing a plain white dress. Her beautiful face was still covered by a veil. Her eyes were as bright as the stars, and one could not help but fall into them with a single glance. "Qin Chuan, we meet again." Yi Qingning walked slowly to Qin Chuan and smiled. "It's great to see that you're fine." Hearing Yi Qingning's words, Qin Chuan laughed. "Thank you for your concern, Miss Yi. Congratulations on advancing to the Golden Core stage. Don't call me Miss Yi. Just call me Qingning." Yi Qingning looked at Qin Chuan. "We're not strangers. There's no need to be so distant." When Qin Chuan heard Yi Qingning's words, Diwu Qingyan's figure involuntarily appeared in his mind. Back then, Diwu Qingyan had said something similar to him. At that time, he and Diwu Qingyan were still considered friends. When he left West Sand City, he left in a hurry and did not deliberately look for Diwu Qingyan. He did not know how Diwu Qingyan was doing now. However, no matter what Diwu Qingyan was doing now, it had nothing to do with him. After all, they were no longer friends. "What are you thinking about?" Yi Qingning looked at Qin Chuan curiously. This man was actually distracted when facing her. This was the first time she had encountered such a situation. Qin Chuan came back to his senses when he heard this. He laughed and said, "I suddenly remembered what happened in the carefree secret realm back then. For a moment, I felt a little sad." When she heard Qin Chuan mention the past, Yi Qingning nodded gently and said to Qin Chuan, "Indeed, what happened in the carefree secret realm back then caused a great change in the Federation structure. As far as I know, there are no more than 20 people who can participate in the preliminary air test every year. However, this year, there are nearly 200 people who can participate in the test. From this, it can be seen that the Federation has begun to change and plan to deal with the upcoming danger." Everyone was a little surprised when they heard Yi Qingning's words. They thought that there would be more than 100 people participating in the preliminary air test every year. They did not expect that this year was a special exception. Qingning, what else do you know? Why don't you share it with us? Qingchuan looked at Yi Qingning curiously. He wanted to know more about the air test. Chapter 682. I don't know much about the preparatory air of Yi, but I heard a family elder who was once a prospective heir of Yi say a lot. The competition between the heirs is very fierce. Yi Qingming looked at Qin Chuan. It's much more terrifying than we can imagine. How intense? Qin Chuan was curious. What were the heirs competing for? Yi Qingming explained to Qin Chuan. You should know that in the entire heir center, 60% of the people are going to be heirs, 30% are going to be heirs, and only 10% can actually become heirs. To become an heir of Kunlun's field, you had to stand out from the 60% of potential heirs and become the 30% of prospective heirs. Then, you had to stand out from the 30% of prospective heirs to become an heir of Kunlun's field, one of the 10%. After hundreds and thousands of years of accumulation, the number of candidates in the Kunlun Air Center is beyond your imagination. They have all been in the ruins of the universe for many years. Even the least outstanding one is a top existence in the outside world. We seem to be standing at the top of the younger generation now, but when we enter the Kunlun Air Center, you will find that we will be at the bottom of the heap, including you. Hearing Yi Qingming's words, Qin Chuan couldn't help but frown deeply. According to Yi Qingming, the heirs in the Air Center were all stronger than the other. Qin Chuan, I'm not exaggerating. As far as I know, the weakest in the Air Center is at the early stage of the Golden Elixir realm, and the strongest is at the nascent soul realm. Yi Qingming's words exploded in everyone's ears like thunder. There were nascent soul realm cultivators among the heirs. Shiyu couldn't help but ask, since they become nascent soul realm cultivators, why do they continue to be heirs? Nascent soul realm cultivators were top existences wherever they went. They could even become patriarchs. Why would they continue to be heirs? What were the benefits of being an heir? Facing Shiyu's question, Yi Qingming pursed her lips and said, You should all know that in our world, the most powerful cultivators are in the late nascent soul stage. There's almost no one in the peak nascent soul stage. Do you know why? Hearing Yi Qingming's question, Qin Chuan subconsciously thought of what Hui Tong had once told him. The laws of this world were incomplete. It was already extremely difficult to reach the nascent soul stage. It was extremely difficult to cultivate further. If one wanted to reach the divine transformation stage from the nascent soul stage, they had to leave this world and go to the outside world where the laws of the world were more complete. Qin Chuan looked at Yi Qingming meaningfully and said, Those heirs of the nascent soul realm stayed there because they wanted to go to the outside world and become soul formation cultivators. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Yi Qingming and Qi Wen were both surprised. Qin Chuan actually knew about the existence of the soul formation stage. However, when they thought of Qin Chuan's background, they understood. It must have been Qin Chuan's teacher or advisor who told him. Even if it wasn't, it must have something to do with the mysterious late nascent soul stage cultivator. What is the soul formation stage? Shiyu's face was full of question marks. Is it also a stage? Above the nascent soul stage is the soul formation stage. Qin Chuan pursed his lips and explained to Shiyu, It is a higher stage, a stage that is impossible to achieve in our world. Hearing Qin Chuan's explanation, Shiyu couldn't help but widen his eyes. He had always thought that the nascent soul stage was the end of the path of cultivation. He didn't expect there to be another path after the end. Qin Chuan is right. Above the nascent soul stage is the soul formation stage. To put it bluntly, in our world, whether it is the Demon Realm or the Star Dragon Federation, there is no soul formation stage cultivator because it is not allowed by the laws of heaven and earth. Yi Qingming's tone was complicated. Those heirs of the nascent soul stage are pursuing the soul formation stage. I don't mind telling everyone a piece of news. Qi Wen couldn't help but say, In the center of the heirs, even the oldest heir of the nascent soul stage is only 400 years old, and the youngest is only 96 years old. Hearing Qi Wen's words, Long Xiao was surprised. A 96-year-old nascent soul stage cultivator? Qi Wen nodded and said to Long Xiao, that 96-year-old nascent soul stage cultivator is from the Shangwan family, a reclusive family. His name is Shangwan Yuanhao. Shangwan Yuanhao. Hearing this name, Qin Chuan subconsciously clenched his fists. An extremely strong, murderous intent suddenly burst out from his eyes. His aura surged, shocking everyone. Qin Chuan, what's wrong? Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan with concern. Are you okay? Qin Chuan. Yi Qingning was surprised. Why was Qin Chuan suddenly so agitated? Facing everyone's concern, Qin Chuan took a deep breath and said to everyone, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. As he spoke, Qin Chuan looked at Qi Wen and said in a low voice, Tell me about this Shangwan Yuanhao. Although everyone felt that Qin Chuan's reaction was strange, they didn't think too much about it. Qi Wen thought for a moment and continued, Shangwan Yuanhao is also a legend. Back then, he was just a soldier on a battlefield, during a war against the demon realm. He unfortunately fell off a cliff and accidentally encountered an ancient relic below the cliff. He obtained a great opportunity from there and went from an ordinary person to an extraordinary genius. In just a few years, he went from an ordinary person to a golden core stage cultivator. Later, Shangwan Yuanhao entered the center of Kunlun's heirs and started to climb up step by step. In 10 years, he was promoted from a reserve Kunlun's heirs to an Kunlun's heirs and also became a nascent soul stage cultivator. You have to know that from the time Shangwan Yuanhao started to cultivate until he reached the nascent soul stage, less than 20 years have passed. This shows how miraculous the opportunity Shangwan Yuanhao obtained from the ancient relic was. After that, Shangwan Yuanhao had been exploring the relic of the universe. Later, for some reason, Shangwan Yuanhao suddenly disappeared and didn't appear again for a long time. Just when we all thought that Shangwan Yuanhao was dead, he reappeared some time ago and returned to the center of Kunlun's heirs, causing a huge commotion. He's at the center of Kunlun's heirs now? Qin Chuan narrowed his eyes and asked, Will we have a chance to see him? Qi Wen shook his head and said, I'm not sure, but I heard that Shangwan Yuanhao will personally send his last disciple to the center of Kunlun's heirs. Maybe you can meet him then. Chapter 683. After talking about Shangwan Yuanhao, Qi Wen started talking about the stars in the center of the Kunlun field. Speaking of Shangwan Yuanhao, I have to mention someone as famous as him. His name is Qin Tian. He was Shangwan Yuanhao's captain in the center of the Kunlun field. He was also Shangwan Yuanhao's sworn friend. Hearing Qi Wen mention Qin Tian's name, Qin Chuan's heart suddenly ached. The unforgettable pain made Qin Chuan realize that this Qin Tian must have a deep connection with him. Maybe, if we're talking about who was in the limelight back then, it had to be Qin Tian. He was definitely the most outstanding and strongest Kunlun field in the history of the Kunlun field. Compared to Shangwan Yuanhao, who changed his fate through fortuitous encounters, Qin Tian reached the peak with his own strength. Unfortunately, good things didn't last long. After exploring the ruins of the universe, Qin Tian disappeared. No one knew where he went. Speaking of which, Shangwan Yuanhao also disappeared at around the same time. People speculated that they might have met some danger in the ruins of the universe, and all of them died. Later, when Shangwan Yuanhao reappeared, that rumor was dispelled. As for whether Qin Tian was alive or dead, it's still a mystery. Hearing Qi Wen's words, everyone was shocked. They had thought that Shangwan Yuanhao was scary enough, but there was someone even scarier than Shangwan Yuanhao, Qin Tian. What a pity. I've only seen Shangwan Yuanhao's glory, but not Qin Tian's. Qi Wen sighed. I don't know how many years it will take for another genius like Qin Tian to appear. Qin Chuan glanced at Qi Wen, who was sighing, and suddenly stood up. I'm going to the bathroom. Everyone looked at Qin Chuan's back, confused. Ever since they mentioned Shangwan Yuanhao, Qin Chuan's expression hadn't been right, as if he had something on his mind. However, if Qin Chuan didn't take the initiative to talk about it, they couldn't ask. They could only hope that Qin Chuan was fine. Whoosh! Qin Chuan splashed his face with cold water. He raised his head and looked at his dripping face in a mirror. His eyes were filled with killing intent that he was trying his best to suppress. Shangguan Yuanhao, we finally have a chance to meet. However, before he met Shangguan Yuanhao, there was one thing he needed to confirm. Who was Qin Tian? Qin Chuan took out his photon computer and contacted Ningya. Qin Chuan's phone. But before he could speak, Ningya smiled and asked, "Are you going to tell me that you're safe?" But it seems that it's a bit late. Qin Chuan pursed his lips and asked, "Is his name Qin Tian?" Upon hearing Qin Chuan's question, Ningya suddenly fell silent. After a long while, she replied, "Yes, his name is Qin Tian. We all like to call him Brother Tian." Qin Chuan took a deep breath. His voice trembled. "This is the first time I've heard of his name. He's a genius. He's more of a genius than anyone else. Yeah, Yuanhao used to be a genius that no one could compare to. He shone so brightly that anyone who stood beside him would be overshadowed. Unfortunately, the heavens are jealous of geniuses. Do you know that he used to be Shangguan Yuanhao's teammate? I didn't enter the Kunlun World's Air Center back then, so I didn't know much about it. I only found out that Shangguan Yuanhao was from the Kunlun World's Air Center after that incident. You said that Shangguan Yuanhao used to be Yuanhao's teammate. Did you see him?" "I haven't, but I might be able to see him soon." "Qin Chuan, don't be rash." Ningya's tone was very serious. "You're no match for him now." "I know." Qin Chuan nodded heavily. "But that doesn't mean that I have to avoid him." "Qin Chuan, I can understand how you feel, but there are some things that you shouldn't rush," Ningya said earnestly. "Listen to your teacher, okay?" Qin Chuan agreed. "I know what to do." After ending the call, Qin Chuan once again looked at the face in the mirror and said in a low voice, "Shangguan Yuanhao, I'm coming." After waiting for 20 minutes, the spacecraft officially took off. Aside from Qin Chuan's group, there were also a few other geniuses on the spacecraft. Some were familiar with others, while others were strangers. However, because of Yi Qingning, everyone's focus was still on the group from the Black Moon Combat Academy. No matter where the Star Dragon Goddess went, it was hard to ignore her. "Miss Yi, I'm Justin." The handsome Justin stood beside Yi Qingning and bowed slightly. "I'm very happy to see you here," he said gracefully. Hearing Justin's words, Yi Qingning smiled and replied politely, "Hello." It seemed that Yi Qingning's response had given Justin great encouragement. He gathered his courage and said to Yi Qingning, "Miss Yi, there's a bar over there. May I have the honor of inviting Miss Yi over for a drink? Juice is fine too." Faced with Justin's invitation, Yi Qingning tactfully declined. "I'm sorry, but I have friends here." Just as Justin was about to say something, Qin Chuan returned from the bathroom and asked everyone, "I want to have a drink. Does anyone want to join me?" When everyone heard Qin Chuan say that he wanted to have a drink, they were stunned. In their impression, Qin Chuan had never touched a drop of alcohol. Why was he suddenly in the mood to have a drink today? "Then let's go." Lu Zi was the first to stand up and walk over to Qin Chuan. "I'll drink as much as you want." At this time, everyone stood up one after another. Whether or not they wanted a drink, they all wanted to sit at the bar with Qin Chuan. Yi Qingning also thought the same. Seeing this, Justin immediately said, "Then let's go together." Qin Chuan glanced at Justin, who looked unfamiliar, and asked, "This is—" "Hello, I'm Justin." Justin smiled at Qin Chuan and said, "I've heard of your name for a long time, but I've never had the chance to meet you. It's fate that brought us together today. I hope I can have a drink with you." Hearing this, Qin Chuan nodded slightly in response. Then he walked over to the bar. Although Qin Chuan's attitude was not very friendly, Justin did not mind. It was normal for geniuses to be a little arrogant. Besides, he did not come for Qin Chuan. His real purpose was to get close to Yi Qingning. The group arrived at the bar. Qin Chuan glanced at the waiter and said indifferently, "Bring out the strongest wine you have." Chapter 684. The strongest wine? When everyone heard Qin Chuan's request, they were all surprised. Qin Chuan, who usually didn't drink, actually wanted to drink the strongest wine for the first time. What was on his mind that he needed to drink to drown his sorrows? Qinchuan, what's wrong with you? Luzi walked to Qinchuan's side and asked worriedly, Can you tell me? Qinchuan shook his head gently and said to Luzi, Don't worry about me. I just want to drink some wine to relieve my boredom. At this time, the waiter had already taken out the strongest wine from the bar and introduced it to Qinchuan. Mr. Qin, this is the strongest wine we have here. It's called Fury of Thunder. It means that once the wine enters the stomach, it will be like the fury of thunder, as if there is a violent thunderbolt exploding in the body. Cultivators below the gold core stage should not try it easily. It will hurt their bodies. Qinchuan nodded and said to the waiter, Thank you for your reminder. Please pour me a glass. Qinchuan sat in front of the bar and looked at the blue wine in the glass. He pursed his lips and then directly picked up the glass and drank the whole glass of wine. Seeing this scene, the waiter was shocked. He had repeatedly told Qinchuan to drink in small sips. He didn't expect that Qinchuan would drink it so boldly. Sir, you. Good. Another glass. Qinchuan laughed and put the glass in front of the waiter, asking him to pour another glass. Seeing this, the waiter was about to persuade Qinchuan, but Lu Zi directly picked up the bottle and filled Qinchuan's glass. She also poured a glass of fruit wine for herself, and then said to Qinchuan, Come, cheers. Qinchuan raised his cup and clinked it with Lu Zi's. He smiled and said, Cheers. When everyone saw Qinchuan and Lu Zi clinking glasses, they also raised their glasses. Justin wanted to clink glasses with Long Xiao, but Yi Qingning acted as if she didn't see him. After clinking glasses with Long Xiao, she started drinking. Justin had no choice but to give up the idea of clinking glasses with Yi Qingning and started drinking on his own. For a moment, other than Qinchuan and Lu Zi who kept clinking their glasses, everyone else seemed to be a little quiet. The atmosphere at the bar also became a little strange. Qinchuan didn't stop until he had finished the entire bottle of Fury of Thunder. It wasn't because he didn't want to drink anymore, but because they were about to teleport to the center of Kunlun Field. The air center wasn't in the Star Dragon Federation. Instead, it was in a cosmic relic that was jointly developed by the Star Dragon Federation and the Demon Realm. Passengers on the spacecraft, please sit in your seats and don't move around. The spacecraft is about to begin an interstellar transition. Hearing the broadcast from the flight attendant, Qinchuan couldn't help but take a deep breath. After the interstellar transition, they would appear in the center of Kunlun Field. He would soon be able to see Shangguan Yuanhao. Buzz. Suddenly, Qinchuan felt his body tremble. Then, he felt his body and soul become light as a feather. Before Qinchuan could completely float, his body and soul were suddenly pulled back by a sudden attractive force. When he felt his body and soul return to their original positions, the interstellar transition was over. Most people on the spacecraft experienced an interstellar transition for the first time. It was very refreshing and extremely strange. Even though the interstellar transition was over, not many people opened their eyes. Everyone was still reminiscing about the magical feeling from before. Everyone, we've arrived at the center of Kunlun Field. Hearing the gentle and sweet voice from the broadcast, Qinchuan subconsciously opened his eyes and looked at the porthole beside him. When he saw the huge city floating in the starry sky, he couldn't help but be stunned. The center of Kunlun Field was a city. At this time, Qi-Wen's voice also sounded in Qinchuan's ears. He smiled and said to everyone, Everyone, the city floating in the starry sky in front of you is the center of Kunlun Field. It's also where you will be living for a period of time. If you have any questions, you can ask me now. Hearing Qi-Wen's words, Shiyu asked curiously, How big is the center of Kunlun Field? Qi-Wen smiled and replied, The center of Kunlun Field is comparable in size to Star Dragon City. It's a city built by the combined forces of the Demon Realm and the Star Dragon Federation. For cultivators, it's both heaven and hell. Hearing Qi-Wen's words, Hu Xiao, who had been silent along the way, couldn't help but ask curiously, Why do you say that? Only cultivators who become Kunlun Field candidates can obtain permanent residency in the center of Kunlun Field. Staff like me only get temporary residency. If I want to live here permanently, I have to work hard in exchange for the right to continue living in the center of Kunlun Field. This time, most of you are here to participate in the assessment of Kunlun Field candidates. If you can pass the assessment, you won't have to worry about these things. However, if you fail the assessment and don't become a Kunlun Field candidate, you won't be able to live in the center of Kunlun Field. You have to leave the next time the spacecraft goes to the Star Dragon Federation. Hearing this, Hu Xiao was confused. Isn't that what we should do? Why is it hell? This was not only Hu Xiao's question, but also the others. Of course, those who failed the assessment should leave the center of Kunlun Field. Qi Wen smiled and said to the crowd, "The reason you don't understand is that you haven't experienced the benefits of the center of Kunlun Field. The laws of heaven and earth in the center of Kunlun Field are more complete than the world we live in. The spiritual power is also more abundant. Cultivation will be faster and smoother than in the Federation. In the Star Dragon Federation, the limit of cultivation is the late stage of the nascent soul realm. But in the center of Kunlun Field, you can cultivate to the peak of the nascent soul realm." Hearing Qi Wen's explanation, the crowd couldn't help but look surprised. They couldn't help but ask, "Has someone cultivated to the peak of the nascent soul realm?" Qi Wen nodded. "That's right. The strongest person in the center of Kunlun Field is the peak of the nascent soul realm. He is the protector of Kunlun Field." Qin Xuan asked curiously, "According to what you said, can those who don't pass the assessment continue to stay in the center of Kunlun Field?" Qi Wen nodded again. "You're right. According to the rules of Kunlun Field, anyone can live in the center of Kunlun Field, but you have to have contribution points first. Otherwise, you'll be expelled." "Then how do we earn contribution points?" Qin Xuan asked again. "Explore the ruins of the universe." Apart from exploring the ruins of the universe and bringing back all kinds of materials and information that the center of Kunlun Field needs, we can also earn contribution points by helping the center fend off the attacks of star beasts, Qi Wen said. "When I failed the assessment, I used this method to stay in the center of Kunlun Field. Then, I became a service member." Chapter 685. Hearing Qi Wen's words, Xiu asked curiously, "You've also participated in the preliminary Kunlun Air assessment?" Qi Wen nodded and sighed. "Yes, I also participated in the preliminary Kunlun Air assessment. Unfortunately, I failed and couldn't become a preliminary Kunlun Air. I wanted to go back, but I didn't want to leave the cultivation environment in the Kunlun Air Center, so I stayed there temporarily. Coincidentally, a star beast attacked the Kunlun Air Center a few days ago. I killed 2 star beasts in the battle and was lucky enough to obtain 2 star stones. That was how I gained a firm foothold in the Kunlun Air Center." Luzi asked in confusion, "What's a star beast? What's a star stone?" Qi Wen explained to everyone, "Star beasts are creatures that wander the universe. They are very aggressive and will attack all creatures they encounter, including the Kunlun Air Center. You'll also come into contact with star beasts when you enter the Kunlun Air Center. As for star stones, they're a special kind of crystal bred in the body of a star beast. This kind of crystal contains a lot of energy. If you use it for cultivation, it's even more effective than a top-grade spirit stone." Hearing Qi Wen's explanation, everyone looked very surprised. They didn't expect to gain so much knowledge before entering the Kunlun Air Center. There are many benefits in the Kunlun Air Center, so I won't introduce them to you one by one. There will be a brochure for you to read. Qi Wen chuckled and said to everyone, "This interstellar journey is about to end. I hope that the next time this spacecraft leaves the Kunlun Air Center and returns to the Star Dragon Federation, we won't see you." Hearing Qi Wen's words, everyone's hearts became heavy. If they failed the assessment, their situation would become very difficult. Seeing everyone's expressions change, Qin Xuan pursed his lips and said to everyone, "Don't be too stressed. I believe that everyone can pass the assessment." Just as Qin Xuan was comforting everyone, the spacecraft slowly landed at the airport of the Kunlun Air Center. Everyone left the spacecraft under Qi Wen's lead and stepped onto the ground of the Kunlun Air Center. An extremely dense spiritual chi rushed towards them, making everyone look very happy. Such dense spiritual chi. Qin Xuan exclaimed, the density of this spiritual power is as if it's being cultivated with high-grade spirit stones all the time. Hearing this, Qi Wen said to Qin Xuan, you're right. Every breath we take in the air center is equivalent to cultivating with top-grade spirit stones in the Star Dragon Federation. It's not an exaggeration to say that even an ordinary person with no cultivation can become a Qi condensation cultivator after staying in the air center for a while. Although the airport in the center of the Kunlun Airs was empty and quiet, it was very lively outside. The neat commercial streets, the people coming and going, the skyscrapers soaring into the starry sky, and the dreamy starry night scene. All kinds of scenes made people's hearts sway. When Qin Xuan and the others walked out of the airport, the people nearby were curious when they saw them. More newcomers have come. I wonder how many of them can become reserve heirs of Yi. It's said that there are a lot of people participating in this year's reserve heirs exam. The competition is very fierce. These people might be sent back. Maybe a few lucky ones will stay. It's time for the annual selection of trash among the eliminated people. These people didn't deliberately avoid Qin Xuan and the others. They even said it for Qin Xuan and the others to hear. Faced with these discussions, Qin Xuan and the others' expressions became serious. They didn't like the feeling of being watched like monkeys. This place doesn't seem friendly to newcomers. Qin Xuan glanced at the people around them. These people looked at them coldly, as if they didn't welcome them. Hearing this, Qi Wen nodded and explained, although the center of the Kunlun Airs is big, its capacity is limited. The more people there are, the less benefits you can get. Especially since there are so many of you this time, many people will choose to stay. This way, the benefits that belong to these people will be divided. Naturally, they won't be nice to you. Hearing Qi Wen's explanation, Qin Xuan pursed his lips and said, benefits are earned with your own strength, not by pushing others out. Qi Wen looked at Qin Xuan with some admiration and said, if these people had the same mentality as you, they wouldn't be in this situation. While speaking, Qi Wen led the group to a flying shuttle. He said to them, my mission is complete. You have to walk the rest of the journey yourselves. The shuttle will take you to the reception of the center of the Kunlun Airs. There will be people there to receive you. Hearing Qi Wen's words, Qin Xuan nodded gently and said, thank you. You're welcome. Qi Wen chuckled. Maybe I'll have to rely on you in the future. After saying goodbye to Qi Wen, the group got on the unmanned shuttle and slowly drove to the reception of the center of the Kunlun Airs. Qin Xuan looked at the silent group and asked, what do you think now? Xiu clenched his fist and said in a low voice, no matter what, even if I have to risk my life, I will pass the test and stay. After coming into contact with the environment of the center of the Kunlun Airs, Xiu definitely didn't want to leave and return to a place with poor spiritual energy. Only here could he go further on the path of cultivation. What about you? Qin Xuan looked at the others and asked, what do you think? The cultivation environment of the Star Dragon Federation is nothing compared to this place. I must stay here. Even if I can't pass the test, I must stay here like Qi Wen. Long Xiao said without hesitation, I will never leave this place. I think the same. Lu Zi smiled. I will do my best to pass the test and become a candidate of the Kunlun Airs. Bai Yu nodded and said lightly, me too. I followed you out of the demon realm and came here to pursue a better cultivation environment and a wider sky. Now that I have seen everything I've been pursuing, I will do my best to seize this opportunity. Hu Xiao looked at the world outside the window with blazing eyes. Everything he wanted was here. Yi Qingming smiled. I have a letter of recommendation. I will definitely stay here. Qin Xuan heard everyone's words and pursed his lips. In that case, everyone should be prepared to stay away from me. Chapter 686. Stay away from you? Everyone was confused by Qin Xuan's words. What did he mean? Seeing the puzzled expressions on everyone's faces, Qin Xuan pursed his lips and said, I might do something very dangerous later. If you get too close to me, there's a high chance that you'll be implicated. The other party might even ignore the rules of the air center and attack me. So, you'd better stay away from me. I don't want to implicate everyone because of me." After hearing Qin Chuan's explanation, everyone was extremely shocked. They couldn't understand what Qin Chuan was talking about at all. "Qin Chuan, what do you mean?" Lu Zi frowned and looked at Qin Chuan. "What do you want to do?" Lu Zi's question was also on everyone's mind. They really wanted to know what Qin Chuan meant by dangerous actions. Facing everyone's confusion, Qin Chuan shook his head and said to them, "Knowing this won't do you any good. You just need to know that I won't harm you." "Qin Chuan, we've known each other for a long time. What can you tell us?" Long Xiao frowned. "Even if you have some difficulties, you should tell us. We'll definitely help you get through it." Long Xiao is right. "We're a team now. We'll share blessings and misfortunes." Lu Zi agreed. "You shouldn't bear everything alone." Facing everyone's concern, Qin Chuan felt very warm in his heart. However, there were some things he really didn't want to implicate so many people. "I appreciate everyone's kindness, but what I'm going to do is my personal matter. It has nothing to do with any of you." Qin Chuan looked at everyone. "Since it's my personal matter, please don't interfere. Let me do it alone." Seeing Qin Chuan's resolute attitude, everyone didn't know what to say for a moment. Just then, the shuttle arrived at the reception of the Kunlun Air Center. "All right, let's go down." Qin Chuan stood up and walked out first, deliberately distancing himself from the others. Seeing Qin Chuan's actions, everyone's expressions became extremely complicated. Who would have thought that this seemingly stable team would fall apart just as they arrived at the air center? No matter what he says or how he views this matter, I will not let him take the risk alone. Lu Zi expressed her attitude and took the lead to follow. Seeing this, everyone hurriedly followed and entered the reception together. The reception hall was extremely spacious, and there were many people inside. However, the scene was extremely quiet. Almost everyone was sitting cross-legged on the ground, and they were all very active. Seeing this, Qin Chuan was not surprised at all. The spirit qi in the center of the Kunlun field was so dense that normal cultivators would seize every moment to cultivate in such an environment. If it were not for what he wanted to say to everyone, he would probably cultivate on the shuttle for a while. Just as Qin Chuan was thinking about this, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him and cheered, "Boss!" Seeing Chun Chongqing suddenly appear, Qin Chuan pursed his lips. However, he did not intend to talk to Qin Chongqing. He turned and walked toward an empty space. Chun Chongqing saw that Qin Chuan did not give him a warm hug and even ignored him directly. He was completely dumbfounded. "Is he angry because I left without saying goodbye?" Qin Chongqing frowned slightly and murmured in a low voice, "Boss shouldn't be so petty, right?" Just as Chun Chongqing was confused, Lu Zi and the others also walked in. Seeing Lu Zi, Chun Chongqing immediately asked, "Is boss angry with me?" Lu Zi heard this and was puzzled. "Why would he be angry with you? When I greeted him just now, he didn't want to talk to me at all. He just ignored me. Isn't he angry with me?" Chun Chongqing looked puzzled. "Could it be that boss lost his memory and doesn't recognize me?" Lu Zi sighed and said to Chun Chongqing, "Not only does he not recognize you, but he also doesn't recognize us now." Chun Chongqing was dumbfounded. "I was just saying, did boss really lose his memory?" Lu Zi shook her head and answered, "He didn't lose his memory, but now he wants us to lose our memories and not recognize him." After hearing Lu Zi's words, Chun Chongqing was completely dumbfounded. He was stunned for a while before asking Lu Zi, "What are you talking about? Why can't I understand a word?" "Don't say that you don't understand. We're also confused now." At this moment, the others also walked into the reception hall and looked at Chun Chongqing helplessly. Qin Chuan's change was too sudden and too strange. They didn't understand what was going on. Why did he suddenly change from friends to strangers? Qin Chuan must have his own thoughts. Let's leave him alone for a while and give him some space. Long Xiao suggested to everyone. When the dangerous thing Qin Chuan said happens, we will decide what to do. Long Xiao's suggestion could be said to be the best and most rational at the moment. Everyone felt that Long Xiao's words made sense. Now was the time when Qin Xuan was competing with himself. They shouldn't join in the fun for the time being. With this thought in mind, everyone walked in the opposite direction of Qin Xuan and casually found an empty space to sit down. Many people were watching the actions of the Black Moon Combat Academy. When they realized that Lu Zi's group wasn't together with Qin Xuan and was instead far away, they were puzzled. Could it be that there was a conflict within the Black Moon Combat Academy? Just as the curious people were pondering these questions, Qin Xuan also noticed the actions of Lu Zi's group. We saw that they weren't moving closer to him. He relaxed a little and quietly began to cultivate. Many people continued to arrive at the reception hall. There were both humans and demons. Everyone had already understood the rules of the World's Air Center. Therefore, although there were some barriers between the humans and demons, there weren't any incidents. Ding-ling, ding-ling. The pleasant sound of a bell suddenly rang in everyone's ears. A tall figure wearing a red muslin dress and barefoot slowly walked in from outside. The sound of the bell came from the braided rope tied around her ankle. However, compared to the lively sound of the bell, the charming face of the girl in the red dress was clearly more attractive. She might be unfamiliar to humans, but she was no stranger to the demons. Even if they hadn't seen her in person, they had heard of her name. She was the only princess of the demons. Chapter 687. It could be said that the arrival of Yaorao had attracted the attention of many people present. Just when everyone was sizing up Yaorao, however, suddenly revealed a smile, then walked toward the corner of the hall. And in that corner, Qin Xuan was sitting cross-legged and quietly cultivating. Yaorao walked step by step towards Qin Xuan, and her action also attracted the attention of everyone present. After determining that the target of Yaorao was Qin Xuan, the expression of everyone present became somewhat subtle. It was said that Qin Xuan and Yaorao had a pretty good relationship when they were in Carefree Secret Realm, and now it seemed that the rumors were not false. Yaorao didn't care what other people thought, and also didn't want to care. What she wanted to do now was to give Qin Xuan, who she hadn't seen for a long time, a big surprise. And just when Yaorao was about to arrive in front of Qin Xuan, suddenly 4 incomparably eye-catching big words appeared in front of Qin Xuan. Strangers don't come near. Seeing these 4 big words, Yaorao couldn't help but stop her footsteps. These strangers shouldn't be talking about her, right? Lu Zi and others who had been paying attention to the situation here all along exposed a helpless expression when they saw these 4 big words. Sure enough, Qin Xuan had thoroughly lost his mind, and his attitude towards everyone was so unfriendly. But they didn't know whether Yaorao would accept this or not. Hey, what are you doing? Yaorao walked to the front of Qin Xuan and squatted down. Then, pointing at those 4 big words, she somewhat curiously asked, "Could it be that many people you don't know are coming to disturb you?" Hearing Yaorao, the corner of Qin Xuan's mouth fiercely twitched. How could he forget about Yaorao, this girl? He could still be a bit unyielding towards other people, but facing Yaorao, he really couldn't be unyielding, and he also didn't know how to explain to Yaorao. Seeing Qin Xuan not speaking, Yaorao couldn't help but lightly raised her eyebrows and asked, "Why aren't you speaking?" Qin Xuan pursed his lips, then said to Yaorao, "You are too close to me." "Too close to you?" Yaorao was slightly taken aback, then once again moved closer to Qin Xuan and almost kissed Qin Xuan's cheek. Her hot breath blew onto Qin Xuan's face as she asked, "Is it still near?" Qin Xuan, wow. Suddenly, cries of surprise resounded in the hall. From the point of view of other people, Qin Xuan and Yaorao looked as if they had already kissed. No one had thought that these 2 people would actually appear so intimate in public. What were these 2 guys doing? Long Xiao was stupefied. Qin Xuan was actually kissing Yaorao. Moreover, it was Yaorao who took the initiative. The reaction of other people was almost the same as Long Xiao. All of them were stupefied by this scene that had suddenly occurred before their eyes. Was Qin Xuan and Yaorao's bold action going to be announced? When everyone was exclaiming in their heart, Qin Xuan, however, as if spring was installed under his feet, he jumped up and ran extremely far away. Seeing Qin Xuan's reaction, Yaorao was somewhat puzzled and asked, "What are you doing? Why are you hiding from me?" Qin Chuan seriously looked at Yao Rao and said to Yao Rao, I am not hiding from you. I'm hiding from everyone. If you don't understand why, you can go and ask them, they will tell you. Having heard what was said, Yao Rao got up and walked to the front of Qin Chuan, then asked, Why should I ask other people about your matter? Could it be that you can't tell me personally? Or are you saying that you don't intend to be the son-in-law of Heavenly Demon Palace? Facing Yao Rao's interrogation, Qin Chuan helplessly sighed and said, I am preparing to do a very dangerous thing, and I am afraid that it will implicate you, so I don't want you to get too close to me. Hearing Qin Chuan's explanation, Yao Rao asked, That's it? Qin Chuan nodded his head and said, That's it. I thought you had found a new lover. Yao Rao snorted, I don't care if you're dangerous or not. In any case, I will not be far away from you. Even if there is danger, we can face it together. You don't need to persuade me, because even if you persuade me, I won't listen. Seeing Yao Rao was completely not acting according to common sense, Qin Chuan couldn't help but have some headache. Just when he wanted to say something to Yao Rao, the staff of reception area seemed to have received some news, and all of them simultaneously walked towards the entrance of reception area, as if they wanted to welcome the arrival of someone. Seeing this scene, everyone was extremely surprised in their heart. One must know, before all of them had arrived, none of them were able to catch the eyes of these staff, but now these proud and arrogant staff were walking towards the entrance with a smile on their face. Could it be that some big shot was coming? When everyone was surprised and curious in their heart, one old and one young, two figures slowly walked in from outside the door. The old man was wearing a dark red tang suit. His face was solemn, and his expression was indifferent. The girl following beside the old man was wearing a capable suit and trousers, and her expression was also somewhat grim. Her gaze swept back and forth in the hall, and when she saw Qin Chuan standing at the corner, the expression on her face suddenly became subtle. The old man very keenly captured the change of expression on the girl's face and asked with concern, What happened? Nothing, I saw a friend. The girl looked towards the old man and said, Can I go and say hello to my friend? The old man nodded his head, Go. Hearing the old man, the girl lifted her foot and walked towards the corner. When everyone in the hall saw the direction of the girl, their expression suddenly became strange. This girl, with such an astonishing lineup before their eyes, was unexpectedly also walking towards Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan looked at the girl who was slowly walking towards him, and his eyes couldn't help but flashed with a touch of complex expression. To be honest, right now his heart was in a mess. What's wrong? Seeing your senior sister, you seem to be unhappy. Yao Rao somewhat confusedly looked at Qin Chuan and asked, You two have a conflict? Yao Rao didn't know about the matter that had happened in West Sand City before. If she knew, then she wouldn't have asked such question. At this time, the girl had already slowly arrived in front of Qin Chuan. She pursed her lips and said to Qin Chuan, Long time no see. Qin Chuan nodded his head and said with a forced smile, Indeed, long time no see, senior sister. Your appearance today is very cool. Qin Chuan had thought of many kinds of ways to reunite with Zhou Lin, but he had never thought that it would be so sudden, making him somewhat don't know how to face Zhou Lin. To be honest, he still hadn't come up with an answer to those questions. Are you talking about those people? Actually, I was also scared, but they didn't come to greet me, rather came to greet my teacher. Zhou Lin faintly smiled. I could be considered to be basking in teacher's light. Teacher? Hearing Zhou Lin's words, Qin Chuan seemed to have thought of something, and suddenly looked towards the old man who was still standing at the entrance. His eyes and the old man's eyes met in the air, as if lightning was flickering. Qin Chuan took a deep breath and asked, Can you tell me your teacher's name? Hearing this, Zhou Lin was slightly surprised, then replied, My teacher's surname is Shangwan, and his name is Yuan Hao. Chapter 688. His surname was Shangwan, and his name was Yuan Hao. When he heard Zhou Lin mention her teacher's name, Qin Chuan's gaze instantly sharpened as he looked at the old man. At this moment, Zhou Lin and Yao Rao were also very keen to discover the change of aura on Qin Chuan's body, and their gaze involuntarily turned toward Shangwan Yuan Hao, who was not far away. They were somewhat puzzled in their hearts, Could it be that Qin Xuan had some past with Shangwan Yuanhao? Without knowing why, Zhou Lin's heart suddenly had a very bad premonition. She looked at Qin Xuan and somewhat uneasily asked, Qin Xuan, do you know my teacher? Qin Xuan pursed his lips and replied, I have long heard of your name. Today is the first time we meet. Hearing Qin Xuan's reply, Zhou Lin still wanted to ask a few more questions, but Qin Xuan had already walked toward Shangwan Yuanhao. Seeing Qin Xuan walking toward Shangwan Yuanhao, the uneasiness in Zhou Lin's heart was instantly magnified. She seemed to have thought of something, and her complexion suddenly became pale. And Yaorao, who was at the side, had already quickly followed and walked side by side with Qin Xuan. Although I don't know what you want to do, but no matter what you want to do, don't even think about leaving me behind. Friends who have just arrived, I am the director of the Kunzi Center's reception office. My name is Su Mo. You can call me Director Su. A shrewd-looking middle-aged man stood in the center of the hall, and looking around, he said to everyone, in order to express our warm welcome to everyone, our Kunzi Center has specially invited an old senior to give a speech to you. When the people in the hall heard Su Mo's words, they subconsciously turned their gazes toward Shangwan Yuanhao, who was dressed in a tang suit. Their faces were filled with curiosity. This old man should be the senior that Su Mo had mentioned. But who exactly was this person? Let me introduce everyone. Su Mo smiled and said to everyone, the person standing in front of you is the greatest genius and expert in the history of our Kunzi Center, Shangwan Yuanhao. Whoosh! Before Su Mo could finish his sentence, the crowd was already in an uproar. They had all heard about Shangwan Yuanhao on their way here and were curious about him. However, they didn't expect to see the legendary figure of the Kunlun's Air Center so soon. He's Shangwan Yuanhao. Lu Zi was a little surprised. Qiwen told us that Shangwan Yuanhao might personally come to send his disciple to the assessment today. Could it be that senior sister Zhou Lin is Shangwan Yuanhao's disciple? When everyone heard Lu Zi's words, they were slightly stunned. Just as they were about to discuss this topic, Chun Changxing said to everyone with a strange tone, let's not talk about whether senior Zhou Lin is Shangwan Yuanhao's disciple first. Why do I feel like boss is going after Shangwan Yuanhao? Hearing Chun Changxing's words, everyone subconsciously looked to the center of the hall. While they were stunned, Qin Xuan was already standing in front of Shangwan Yuanhao. My new friend, I know you admire senior Shangwan a lot and want to get close to him. However, now is not the time. Please stay rational. Su Mo was very responsible and stood between Qin Xuan and Shangwan Yuanhao. He didn't want to let Qin Xuan get close to Shangwan Yuanhao. If Shangwan Yuanhao was unhappy because of this, his position as the director would be over. Everyone in the hall felt strange when they saw Qin Xuan's behavior. Although Qin Xuan was a legendary figure, there was no need for Qin Xuan to rush over to greet him. Shangwan Yuanhao. Qin Xuan stood where he was and ignored Su Mo, who had stopped him. His eyes were fixed on Shangwan Yuanhao, as if he wanted to engrave Shangwan Yuanhao's appearance in his mind. Su Mo couldn't help but frown when he heard Qin Xuan call Shangwan Yuanhao's name. As a junior, this brat actually called Shangwan Yuanhao by his name. Wasn't this a little too rude? Shangwan Yuanhao looked at Qin Xuan meaningfully when he heard Qin Xuan's call. Then he said to Su Mo, move aside. Upon hearing Shangwan Yuanhao's order, Su Mo immediately stepped to the side and made way for Qin Xuan. Qin Xuan didn't approach Shangwan Yuanhao because of this. Why aren't you coming over? Shangwan Yuanhao looked at Qin Xuan curiously. Didn't you want to stand in front of me? Qin Xuan pursed his lips and said, right now, I still don't have the qualifications to stand in front of you. But very soon, I will have that qualification. Shangwan Yuanhao chuckled and asked, after you have that qualification, what do you want to do? Qin Xuan looked at Shangwan Yuanhao deeply and said, I will kill you. Boom. Qin Xuan's words seemed to have dropped a heavy bomb in the hall, causing everyone's heads to buzz. Qin Xuan actually wanted to kill Shangwan Yuanhao? Wasn't he crazy? Zhou Lin looked at Qin Xuan in a daze. She was completely sluggish. She felt as if there was a huge gap between her and Qin Xuan because of those words, an insurmountable gap. Yaorao was also stunned. She didn't expect that Qin Chuan would actually declare war on Shangwan Yuanhao, who was a nascent soul cultivator in public. Is this the dangerous thing he was talking about? Luzi looked at Qin Chuan with a complicated gaze. Declaring war on a nascent soul cultivator with the strength of an early golden core cultivator. How was this dangerous? This was clearly pushing himself off a cliff. At this moment, everyone from the Black Moon Combat Academy finally understood why Qin Chuan said that he was worried about implicating them. With Shangwan Yuanhao's ability and background in the Kunlun world's air center, if he wanted to get rid of them secretly, it would be too easy. You're very interesting. Shangwan Yuanhao looked at Qin Chuan and said, "How many years has it been since someone dared to speak to me like this? I thought that the moment I saw you, I would be angry and lose my mind. But now, I'm much calmer than I expected." Qin Chuan calmly looked at Shangwan Yuanhao and said, "Originally, I was still wondering why Hei Cheng suddenly wanted to kill me. But when I found out that you were senior sister's teacher, I understood that the person who wanted to kill me was you. My existence made you feel fear, right? What a joke." Shangwan Yuanhao smiled faintly and said, "A mere early golden core cultivator. Why should I feel fear? Because 2 years ago, I was just an ordinary person. 2 years later, I'm already an early golden core cultivator." Qin Chuan pursed his lips and said, "You're so anxious to borrow Hei Cheng's strength to deal with me. Isn't it because my growth speed is too shocking that you don't dare to give me 2 more years?" Shangwan Yuanhao was silent for a long time. Then he sighed and said, "Brother Tian is lucky to have a son like you." Qin Chuan looked at Shangwan Yuanhao with a sharp gaze and said, "You don't deserve to call him Brother Tian." Chapter 689. Everyone in the hall looked at Qin Chuan strangely. This was the first time they saw a golden core cultivator who dared to be so disrespectful to a nascent soul cultivator. Even if he was a newborn calf that wasn't afraid of a tiger, this was too much. In the face of Qin Chuan's disrespect, Shangwan Yuanhao looked deeply into Qin Chuan's eyes and asked, "Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you out of humiliation?" "I'm afraid, but you're more afraid than I am." Qin Chuan looked deeply into Shangwan Yuanhao's eyes. "If you dared to attack me, you wouldn't be talking nonsense with me." In the face of the terrifyingly calm Qin Chuan, Shangwan Yuanhao couldn't help but fall silent. Qin Chuan was right. He didn't dare to attack Qin Chuan because he was afraid of the rules of the air center. Even though he was a nascent soul cultivator, he still had to strictly abide by the rules. After a moment of silence, Shangwan Yuanhao looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle gaze. "You're a smart person. Compared to your strength, your calm mind is more frightening. I'll take that as a compliment." Qin Chuan didn't have any interest in continuing the conversation with Shangwan Yuanhao. He prepared to return to his original corner and wait quietly until the test began. Qin Chuan turned around and looked at the pale-faced Zhou Lin behind him. He couldn't help but reveal a complicated smile. He said softly to Zhou Lin, "Senior sister, I'm very sorry." Zhou Lin looked at Qin Chuan with tears in her eyes. She asked in confusion, "What grudge do you have with teacher? Can't you sit down and talk it out?" Zhou Lin didn't understand. She really didn't understand why the atmosphere between Qin Chuan and Shangwan Yuanhao was so tense and aggressive. It's probably impossible to talk it out. Qin Chuan pursed his lips. "Senior, your teacher killed the 2 most important people in my life. I have to avenge them." Upon hearing Qin Chuan's words, Zhou Lin seemed to have understood something. She froze on the spot and forgot to think. She even forgot to breathe. When she regained her senses, Qin Chuan was no longer in front of her. The person standing in front of her was Shangwan Yuanhao. "You seem very sad." Shangwan Yuanhao looked at Zhou Lin with a serious expression. A bitter expression appeared on Zhou Lin's face when she heard this. She said in a low voice, "My father wanted to kill Qin Chuan, and my teacher wanted to kill Qin Chuan as well. They even killed the 2 most important people in Qin Chuan's life. Shouldn't I be sad that something like this happened to me?" After saying this, Zhou Lin asked Shangwan Yuanhao again, "Teacher, were the 2 people Qin Chuan mentioned as parents?" Shangwan Yuanhao fell silent for a moment before nodding. "That's right. They were his parents. I was the one who killed them back then. After hearing the exact answer from Shangwan Yuanhao, Zhou Lin's expression couldn't help but become extremely pained. She asked unwillingly why. There aren't so many whys in this world. Since it happened, it's reasonable. Shangwan Yuanhao looked at Zhou Lin with a deep gaze. You can choose to honor your teacher or betray your teacher. After saying this, Shangwan Yuanhao prepared to leave. At this moment, Zhou Lin suddenly said to his back, "Then even if Qin Chuan kills you one day, is it reasonable?" Upon hearing Zhou Lin's question, Shangwan Yuanhao's footsteps paused. He replied without turning his head, "It's reasonable that it exists." "Qin Chuan, is this the dangerous thing you said?" Looking at Qin Chuan, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, Yao Rao said, "You are worried that Shangwan Yuanhao will directly attack you, so you let us stay away from you, right?" Having heard what was said, Qin Chuan nodded his head and said, "Before, I wasn't sure whether the rules of Kunzi Realm Center were binding on Shangwan Yuanhao or not. But after coming into contact with Shangwan Yuanhao, I am sure that even with his identity, he still has to abide by the rules of Kunzi Realm Center. In other words, he can't attack us in Kunzi Realm Center. As long as we don't leave Kunzi Realm Center, we are safe." Hearing Qin Chuan, Yao Rao asked Qin Chuan, "So what is the enmity between you and Shangwan Yuanhao?" Although Yao Rao already had a guess about the answer, but she still wanted to hear the answer from Qin Chuan's mouth. Qin Chuan was silent for a moment, then said to Yao Rao, "My parents died in the hands of Shangwan Yuanhao, so I must avenge them. If not for Shangwan Yuanhao, his childhood should have been very happy. He had a Superman-like father who protected him, had the world's most gentle mother, and perhaps also had a younger brother or younger sister. His family would have lived happily together without any worries. But Shangwan Yuanhao destroyed everything." Looking at that grave and stern expression on Qin Chuan's face, Yao Rao knew that Qin Chuan must be very painful in his heart. She reached out her hand and held Qin Chuan's hand, then seriously said to Qin Chuan, "Let's work hard together and avenge father and mother together." Hearing Yao Rao, Qin Chuan looked at Yao Rao with somewhat complicated gaze, then said in low voice, "Perhaps I will die, and you will also die. I don't want Qin Chuan. I am not afraid of being implicated, and I'm also not afraid of death. Could it be that you still can't see my intention from the way I address your parents?" Yao Rao looked at Qin Chuan with deep affection. "I have decided on you in this life. Even if I die, I will die together with you." Cough, cough. At this time, a light cough sound came from behind Yao Rao. Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan and Yao Rao, who were sticking together with subtle gaze, then asked, "I am not disturbing you too, am I?" Yao Rao turned around and looked at Lu Zi standing behind her, then faintly smiled and said, "You are not disturbing. You have come at the right time." Lu Zi deeply looked at Yao Rao, then said to Qin Chuan, "You are right. Qin Chuan has already obtained encouragement and support in love. Now it should be friendship's encouragement and support." While speaking, Lu Zi had already arrived beside Qin Chuan. She squatted down and held the other hand of Qin Chuan, then said to Qin Chuan, "I don't know what kind of grudge you have with Shangwan Yuanhao, and also don't know what you plan to do, but I want to tell you, no matter what your choice is, I will support you and will not leave you. I represent not only my own attitude, but also everyone's attitude." Yao Rao heavily nodded her head, then said to Qin Chuan, "Lu Zi is right. No matter what, we will not leave you." Facing the encouragement and support of Lu Zi and Yao Rao, Qin Chuan really couldn't help but shed tears. In his most difficult time, there were still so many people encouraging and supporting him, he really didn't know how to express the gratitude in his heart. Thank you all. Chapter 690. Everyone gather. Following Sumo's call, the people in the hall immediately started to gather. They spontaneously stood in a neat line. No one dared to slack off. Long before they came to the air center, someone had already reminded them that they were high and mighty geniuses in the outside world, but in the air center, they were the lowest existence. They had to temporarily put away their arrogance so that they could have a better life in the air center. Every one of them carried the expectations of their elders, so they couldn't afford to lose. Suemo looked at the people standing in front of him and said loudly, "Now, everyone with a recommendation letter, step out." Hearing Sumo's words, everyone with a recommendation letter immediately stepped out of the line and came to the open space outside. Qingchuan did the same. He looked around. There weren't many people with recommendation letters, but there were surprisingly many people he knew. Yi Qingning, Su Kuang, Zhou Lin, Chen Changxing, and Long Xiao. Zhou Lin was deliberately avoiding Qingchuan, and Qingchuan was also deliberately avoiding Zhou Lin. In order to ease the awkwardness in his heart, Qingchuan took the initiative to walk to Su Kuang's side. Su Kuang smiled at Qingchuan, who was walking over. "I wanted to say hello to you just now, but I didn't have the chance." Qingchuan looked at Su Kuang with a subtle gaze and asked, "You're not afraid?" "Why should I be?" Su Kuang laughed. "We're friends in the past and in the future." Hearing Su Kuang's words, Qingchuan felt that his previous thoughts were completely wrong. No matter what difficulties he encountered, a true friend would never leave him. Just as Qingchuan and the others stood in line again, Suemo was already in front of them. He said to them, "Take out your recommendation letters." Hearing this, Qingchuan and the others immediately took out their recommendation letters from their storage rings. Suemo glanced at them and reached out to take Qingchuan's recommendation letter. Rip! Suemo tore apart Qingchuan's recommendation letter and threw it on the ground. He said to Qingchuan, "Your recommendation letter is gone. Go to the queue over there." Everyone was shocked when they saw Sumo's actions. Suemo actually tore apart Qingchuan's recommendation letter in front of Qingchuan. He didn't even try to cover it up. However, thinking of Sumo's flattery toward Shangwan Yuanhao and how Qingchuan had offended Shangwan Yuanhao, everyone understood. However, the way they looked at Qingchuan became strange. Qingchuan had just arrived at the center of the Kunlun heirs, and he had already offended someone important. It seemed that he would have a hard time in the future. Qingchuan lowered his head and looked at the recommendation letter on the ground. He had expected Shangwan Yuanhao to target him, but he had not expected it to come so quickly. "Su Chu, what do you mean by this?" Long Xiao frowned. "Why did you tear up Qingchuan's recommendation letter? Which one of your eyes saw me tear it up?" Suemo cast a sidelong glance at Long Xiao. "Here you are not the daughter of a rich family. You are just an ordinary member of the Kunlun heirs. Please correct your attitude. I am your superior. If you don't know how to speak, then shut up." Facing Sumo's reprimand, Long Xiao was extremely angry in her heart. She was about to say something, but was stopped by Qingchuan. "Thank you." Qingchuan slightly smiled. "Don't let your emotions affect your decisions." After appeasing the angry Long Xiao, Qingchuan turned around and walked back to the original queue. He once again stood beside everyone. At this time, a tearing sound resounded in the quiet hall. Yao Rao casually threw the torn recommendation letter on the ground and said to Suemo, "My recommendation letter is also gone. Can I go over there now?" Suemo glanced at the scraps of paper thrown on the ground by Yao Rao. Then, slightly narrowing his eyes, he said, "Princess Yao Rao, are you sure you want to do this?" In front of Qingchuan, Suemo could be arrogant and despotic, but in front of Yao Rao, he however had to restrain himself a little. After all, Demon Clan had extremely strong influence in the Kunlun Air Center, and as the only daughter of the current Demon Emperor, Yao Rao could be said to be doted on. If he offended Yao Rao and provoked those big demons, then his future days would be very difficult. Yao Rao didn't speak to Suemo again. She completely didn't want to pay attention to Suemo. She directly walked out of the queue, then came to the side of Qingchuan and stood there, then said to Qingchuan, "I said, don't think you can throw me off." Having heard this, Qingchuan somewhat helplessly looked at Yao Rao and said, "Why are you like this? This assessment may not be able to stump me. Of course, I am not worried about whether you can pass the assessment or not. What I am worried about is the bad intentions of these people." Yao Rao said to Qingchuan in a low voice, "My identity is special if I am together with you. Then if they want to frame you, they will have to think twice." Hearing Yao Rao, Qingchuan's face couldn't help but reveal a touch of complex expression, then said in a low voice, "Thank you. Why are you so polite with me?" Yao Rao glanced at Lu Zi, who was standing beside Qingchuan. and said, "But I am your fiancé." Along with the voice of Yaorao, the body of Lu Zi couldn't help but tremble. Seeing this scene, the corner of Yaorao's mouth couldn't help but reveal a hint of satisfied smile. This was exactly the effect she wanted. When Su Imo saw Yaorao was completely ignoring him and was even whispering with Qin Chuan, although he was extremely angry in his heart, but he couldn't do anything about it. It could be said that he was quite sullen. At this time, another person walked out. Directly taking the recommendation letter to become a reserve Kunlun heirs is too boring. Chun Chongqing unhurriedly walked out of the queue, then stretched out his hand to tear his recommendation letter, but was stopped by Su Kuang. "Chongqing, don't act recklessly. The number of people who can form a team in assessment is limited." Su Kuang said to Chun Chongqing in a low voice. "If you do this, you will make things very difficult for Qin Chuan." Having heard Su Kuang, Chun Chongqing slightly frowned, then looked toward Qin Chuan. When he saw Qin Chuan was shaking his head towards him with a serious expression, he helplessly scratched his head, then said to ashen-faced Qin Chuan, "Just a moment ago, I was just joking." Having heard Chun Chongqing, Su Imo coldly snorted and said, "Who else wants to tear their recommendation letter? Now I will give you a chance." Hearing Su Mo's words, everyone remained silent. Seeing this, Su Imo coldly said, "Now all of you come with me. I will take you to the place where you will participate in assessment." Hearing Su Mo's words, everyone's spirit was lifted up. They had already stayed in this hall for most of the day, and finally, they were waiting for this moment. After passing the assessment, they would become reserve Kunlun heirs and could permanently live in the Kunlun Air Center. Cultivating in such an excellent environment, Yuanying Realm was just around a corner. Under the lead of Su Imo, everyone passed through a long corridor and arrived at an extremely huge transmission door. Looking at that transmission door, which was emitting light blue radiance, everyone's eyes widened. This was the first time they had seen such a huge transmission door. Chapter 691. Looking at everyone's amazed expressions, Su Imo proudly said to everyone, "This teleportation gate in front of you is different from the teleportation arrays you've seen in the past. This teleportation gate is a magical door that can truly cross the universe. And the location of your assessment is behind this portal." Everyone was shocked to hear Su Mo's words. What was behind this portal? Facing everyone's curiosity, Su Imo said lightly, "Behind this portal is a universal relic that has basically been explored. There is no danger inside. The real danger is the people around you." The people around them? Everyone looked puzzled. What was the meaning of this? Seeing everyone's confusion, Su Imo sneered and said, "The rules of the test are simple. Behind the portal, there are many small portals. You can use these small portals to return here. Those who return here are considered to have passed the test. The small portals can only be used once, which means that only one person can pass the test at a time. The others will have to continue searching for new small portals. There are a total of 200 people here, and the number of small portals in the Universal Relic is 100. 200 to 100, the elimination rate was as high as 50%. After hearing Su Mo's explanation of the assessment rules, everyone's expression became extremely solemn. Originally, they wanted to team up to pass the assessment, but now it seemed that this method would not work. Seeing everyone's expression change, Su Imo continued with a smile, "The assessment allows you to give up. Once you choose to give up, you will be eliminated and sent out of the Air Center. Although this result is difficult to accept, it is better than dying in the Universal Relic." Die? Someone couldn't help but ask, "Su Chu, didn't you say that there is no danger in the Universal Relic?" Su Imo smiled playfully. "But I also said that the real danger is the people around you. In the ruins of the universe, you can form an alliance, or you can kill each other. The choice is in your hands." Everyone's expression became extremely shocked when they heard Su Mo's words. The assessment allowed them to attack others. This assessment is really interesting. Someone laughed and said, "Not only does it test our strength, but it also tests our temperament. Whether acting alone or in a group, there will be danger. The latter is even more dangerous than the former. In my opinion, the most important thing in this assessment is luck. If you're lucky enough to find a small portal by yourself, then it will be safe. Everyone nodded subconsciously when they heard this. If they wanted to pass this assessment, strength was secondary. Luck was the most important. Now, if you have any questions, you can ask directly. After the assessment begins, I will refuse to answer all your questions. Suemo looked at everyone. In addition, the assessment will end when all the small portals are ineffective. Seeing that no one raised any questions, Suemo said, "Since no one has any questions, let's begin my assessment." As he spoke, Suemo took out a cigarette and lit it up. He took a deep puff and said to everyone, "After I finish this cigarette, you can rush in. Let me give you a friendly reminder. After you enter the portal, you will be teleported to a platform. There are 3 small portals on that platform." Everyone's eyes lit up when they heard Sumo's friendly reminder. If that was the case, wouldn't the first person to rush into the portal have the chance to complete the assessment? For a moment, everyone's eyes were focused on the cigarette in Sumo's mouth. They nervously waited for the cigarette to burn out. Bada bada. Suemo took 2 deep breaths and then threw the cigarette but into a nearby trash can. Before the cigarette but landed in the trash can, everyone had already rushed out like wild horses. Suemo looked at the figures rushing into the portal, and a cold smile appeared on his face. He murmured, "I wonder how many people will die this time." Everyone, don't rush in too fast. Don't think about snatching those 3 portals. Qin Chuan said to everyone around him, "We'll rush in the middle. After entering the portal, we'll leave the entrance immediately." Everyone nodded when they heard Qin Chuan's words. With their team's strength, they could naturally fight for the 3 portals at the entrance. However, there was really no need to waste too much time and energy. Buzz. The moment Qin Chuan's body came into contact with the portals, he felt his body tremble. The next moment, his figure appeared on a huge platform. In the center of the platform, there were 3 small portals that were 2 meters tall, emitting a light blue glow. Near the portals, there were dozens of figures fighting. The battle looked very intense. At that moment, the others were teleported over as well. Like Qin Chuan, they also saw the situation near the 3 small teleportation gates. Aside from the dozens of figures fighting, there were also many others eyeing the teleportation gates covetously, waiting for an opportunity to strike. "Let's go." Without any hesitation, Qin Chuan turned around and ran down the platform. Upon seeing this, everyone immediately followed him. At this time, many people also made the same choice as Qin Chuan. All of them looked at a direction where there was no one and quickly advanced. On the way out of the platform, Qin Chuan looked at everyone around him and said, "After we find the portal, we will send the girls out first. The boys will stay behind." Regarding Qin Chuan's arrangement, no one had any objection. Even Yaorao also didn't raise any objection, because the assessment's rules didn't allow them to leave this place at the same time. Someone must go first and someone must go later. This was an extremely desolate space ruin. In addition to broken stone buildings, there was nothing else. The entire land was unobstructed. The speed of Qin Chuan's group was extremely fast. In merely few minutes, they had already covered nearly 10,000 meters. However, other than the broken walls and ruins, they didn't see even a single small portal. "Did we run the wrong direction?" Shiyu somewhat doubtfully asked. "Why didn't we see even a single small portal?" "This is nothing," Hu Shao said to Shiyu. "Compared to the entire space ruin, the distance we have run is just a drop in the ocean. You all look ahead." At this time, Luzi suddenly exclaimed, then pointed her finger in front of them. On top of a boulder, a small portal was quietly standing there. At the same time that LVZ discovered this miniature teleportation gate, another group of people also discovered this miniature teleportation gate. Chapter 692. We were the first to discover it. Not far away, a group of people vigilantly looked at Qin Chuan's group. Apparently, they were unwilling to have a conflict with Qin Chuan's group. Facing the vigilant gaze of these people, Qin Xuan without demur directly used dragon transformation technique to transform into Azure Thunder Dragon, then faced the sky and roared. His imposing aura was astonishing. Seeing Qin Xuan had assumed a fighting posture, everyone immediately stepped forward and confronted that group of people. You all, seeing Qin Xuan's group was so powerful, those people couldn't help but show fear. They didn't want to have a big fight because they didn't know who could enter the portal. Qin Xuan looked at everyone in front of him, then said to Lu Zi beside him, "Little Zi, you go in first." Hearing Qin Xuan, Lu Zi opened her mouth, then again looked at Yao Rao, but in the end she didn't say anything, then turned around and walked towards the small portal above the boulder. Seeing this scene, that group of people couldn't help but feel anxious in their heart. But at this time, Qin Xuan roared again, successfully scaring these people away. Everyone must pass the assessment. Lu Zi looked at everyone, then clenching her teeth, she turned around and walked into the small portal. Everyone watched as Lu Zi entered the small portal and saw the light of the small portal dimming. But they didn't have any sad mood because they believed that as long as they closely followed Qin Xuan's footsteps, none of them would be left behind. Let's go. We continue to look for the next small portal. Qin Xuan released dragon transformation technique and returned to human form, then led everyone to continue to rush towards the depths of the universe ruins. Just when Qin Xuan's group was looking everywhere for the traces of small portal, everything that happened in the universe ruins was being recorded by the monitoring system and transmitted to the activity hall of the Kunlun Realm Center. At this time, nearly 1,000 people were watching this assessment in the activity hall. Who do you think will be able to grab the 3 small portal on the platform? I guess that fierce-looking guy will definitely be able to. Every time he makes a move, he is aiming to kill people. It seems he has killed a lot of people outside. Hey, who do you think that guy is? Let me tell you, the real ruthless person has already gone to the depths. He didn't stay on this platform. Ruthless person? Don't tell me you know someone among them? Let me tell you secretly, someone among this group of newcomers did a big thing today. Guess what it is? Don't keep us in suspense. Quickly say it. Humph. Let me tell you, in this group of newcomers, there is someone called Krupp in front of Kunlun Realm Kunlun. He bluntly said that he will kill Kunlun. Brother, do you stupid? Unless that newbie is tired of living. How could he provoke Shangwan's heir? That's right. Heir Shangwan is a big shot in the center of the Kunlun heirs. It's good enough that ordinary people don't suck up to Heir Shangwan when they see him. They even threaten to kill him. Are they kidding? Just as everyone was expressing their doubts and snorting disdainfully, another person suddenly walked over and said to them, "He's right. That guy called Qin Xuan did openly provoke teacher and even threatened to kill him." Everyone was shocked when they saw the figure that suddenly appeared. If they did not believe what the previous person had said, they had no choice but to believe what the person in front of them said. That was because the person in front of them was Shangwan Yuanhao's 4th disciple, Si Tang. Hiss, isn't that newbie a little too daring? Audacious. Si Tang laughed coldly. How audacious? Look, it's the person on the crystal screen. The person who had mentioned this earlier suddenly pointed at the crystal screen in the activity hall and said to everyone, "He's Qin Xuan." When everyone heard this, they subconsciously turned their heads to look at the crystal screen. When they saw Qin Xuan confronting a group of people, they were curious. So, this was a newbie who had threatened to kill Shangwan Yuanhao. He did not seem to be anything special. Si Tang stared coldly at Qin Xuan's figure on the crystal screen and said in a deep voice, "B****. I hope you can pass the test alive. That way, I'll have a chance to torture you." In less than half a day, Qin Xuan and the rest had already discovered 4 miniature teleportation portals. They had also successfully sent Lu Zi, Yao Rao, Bai Yu, and Hu Xiao away. They were currently competing with other groups for the 5th miniature teleportation portal. At that moment, only she was left with Qin Xuan. However, the other party had a total of 10 people. Moreover, all of them were cultivators in the beginning stage of the Golden Core realm. "Qin Xuan, you go first. I'll cover you." When she saw that the other party had the advantage in numbers, she immediately said to Qin Xuan, From the looks of it, even if we give up on competing with them, they will not let us go. When Qin Chuan heard Shi Yu's words, he turned to look at the other party. Just as Shi Yu had said, the other party had already surrounded him and Shi Yu. Clearly, they did not intend to let them leave alive. Stop talking nonsense. You go first. I'll cover you. As he spoke, Qin Chuan took out a small mechanical box from his storage ring. Following a buzzing sound, Qin Chuan's body was enveloped in a set of moon-white battle armor. Exclusive battle armor. When the other party saw Qin Chuan wearing the battle armor, the killing intent in their eyes was slightly restrained. It was naturally very easy for the 10 of them to deal with 2 cultivators in the early stage of the Golden Core realm. However, if one of them had an exo with an exclusive battle armor, then it would be hard to say. You two, as long as you are willing to withdraw from the competition, we will let you go. How about it? In order to not cause any loss of combat power, they decided to let Qin Chuan and Shi Yu leave. However, at this time, Qin Chuan was indeed in high spirits. He had no intention of leaving at all. Go quickly, Qin Chuan shouted in a low voice. His figure suddenly flickered. The next moment, he appeared behind one of the other party. He held 2 cross-shaped wavy swords in his hands and directly stabbed at the back of the other party. Clang! The cross-shaped wavy swords in Qin Chuan's hands did not pierce the other party's body. They only cut the other party's clothes, revealing the best soft armor inside. Although this blow did not kill the other party, it had almost killed him. If Qin Chuan's sword was not aimed at piercing the other party's body, but to behead the other party, he would be a dead man now. Kill him. Seeing that Qin Chuan had no intention of retreating, the other party could only grit their teeth and fight with Qin Chuan. At this time, Qin Chuan was fighting with the other party with the superior performance of number 1. He was not at a disadvantage. What are you waiting for? Go! Qin Chuan shouted angrily at Shi Yu, who was hesitating not far away. I can't hold on for long. Chapter 693. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Shi Yu no longer hesitated. He gritted his teeth and ran toward the small portal not far away. Shi Yu wanted to fight side by side with Qin Chuan, but he knew very well that even if he joined the battle at this time, it would be useless. Maybe both of them would die here. If he left through the portal, Qin Chuan might be able to break through with the strength of his exclusive battle armor. Therefore, what he needed to do now was to make sure that Qin Chuan would not have any worries and could break through with peace of mind. Stop him! When the group of people saw Shi Yu going through the small portal, they immediately wanted to intercept him. However, Qin Chuan entangled them, not giving anyone a chance to leave. Seeing Shi Yu approaching the small portal step by step, they could not stop him. The anger made them pour all their anger on Qin Chuan involuntarily. Kill him for me. When this group of people gave up on fighting for the small teleportation door and focused all their energy on attacking, the pressure on Qin Chuan suddenly became immense. Even with number 1 superiority, he felt that it was difficult to hold on. Looking at the various magic weapons and spiritual power fluctuations flying in the sky, Qin Chuan felt that these people seemed to have completely fallen into madness. It was as if killing him was one of the contents of the assessment. If he could not escape in time, he might not be able to leave today. Moonlight slash! Qin Chuan shouted in a low voice and suddenly swung a crescent moon blade at the people in front of him. Facing the powerful moonlight slash, everyone subconsciously dodged, leaving a gap in the tight encirclement. Qin Chuan seized this extremely small opportunity and his figure flickered again and again. In an instant, he escaped the encirclement and quickly rushed into the distance. Seeing this scene, someone was furious. What are you doing? Why didn't you stop him? Hearing this person's roar, someone retorted, You didn't face his attack directly, so it's easy for you to say. Seeing that the group of people was about to quarrel, someone immediately said, Okay, don't quarrel. Should we continue to chase him or find the next small portal? At this time, Qin Chuan had successfully escaped. With the speed of his battle armor, he could definitely get rid of them in a short time. Chasing after Qin Chuan now was purely a waste of time and energy. now that there were fewer and fewer small portals. If they did not work hard to find a small portal, they were afraid that they would be eliminated directly. Let's go and find a small portal. In the activity hall, the scene of Qin Chuan fighting 10 gold core stage cultivators alone and protecting Shiyu was a panorama. Everyone's opinion on Qin Chuan's performance could be said. Some people felt that it was wrong for Qin Chuan to focus on brotherhood at this time. He should first ensure that he passed the assessment. There were also people who felt that Qin Chuan was powerful and that it wouldn't be difficult for him to find another small teleportation portal on his own. There were even more people who felt that Qin Chuan's subsequent encounters were all due to teamwork. It was not realistic for Qin Chuan to rely on his own strength to obtain a small portal. If not for that battle armor, he would have been a pile of meat by now. Someone said that Qin Chuan's performance was so strong purely because he had a battle armor. If not for that battle armor, Qin Chuan would not have been able to escape so easily. Many people agreed with this person. Si Tang looked at those who agreed and laughed coldly. Based on what you said, if those nascent soul stage cultivators were not of a higher cultivation level than us, how different would they be from rotten fish and shrimps? When the crowd heard Si Tang's mocking words, their expressions became a little awkward. However, Si Tang was still not satisfied. She continued to mock them. If I gave you a battle armor, would you dare to fight against 10 opponents of the same cultivation level? Battle armors, it could increase a cultivator's strength by a lot. However, that was only for one-on-one battles. If they were outnumbered, the battle armor's advantage would be very small. Therefore, in Si Tang's opinion, Qin Chuan's performance in the previous battle was perfect. Seeing that no one said anything, Si Tang snorted and said with disdain, "A bunch of trash. No wonder you're all reserve air of ye." When everyone heard Si Tang's words, they felt extremely aggrieved. However, they could not say anything to refute her. Si Tang was right. They were all preparatory Kunlun heirs and had been for many years. On the other hand, Si Tang had successfully passed the examination and become a prospective Kunlun heir in her 3rd year as a preparatory Kunlun heir. Her status in the Kunlun Heir Center was not something that preparatory Kunlun heirs could compare to. Therefore, no one dared to say anything to Si Tang. At that moment, the crystal screen suddenly turned black. The examination process was no longer being broadcasted. Although the crowd was surprised, they did not take it to heart. When Si Tang saw this, she seemed to have thought of something. She could not help but look gloomy. Then, she turned around and walked out. Qin Chuan sat on an empty ground and looked at the small teleportation portal in front of him. He was confused. Previously, he had clearly seen that the small teleportation portal was still glowing. However, when he got closer, the small teleportation portal suddenly dimmed. It had lost its ability to teleport. Could someone have gone in while invisible? Qin Chuan frowned slightly. He had clearly used his senses to sense his surroundings. However, he did not find any traces of anyone else, unless this person was very good at concealment and could completely fool his senses. After checking again and confirming that the small teleportation portal had indeed lost its ability to teleport, Qin Chuan did not hesitate any longer. He turned around and continued walking. Strangely, not long after Qin Chuan left, the small teleportation portal that was supposed to lose its ability to teleport lit up again. It had come back to life. At first, Qin Chuan did not notice anything wrong. However, after encountering the teleportation portal that suddenly lost its ability to teleport 3 times in a row, he knew that someone had not entered the small teleportation portal before him. Instead, he was being targeted. When he thought about how Su Mo tore apart his recommendation letter in the hall, Qin Chuan was almost certain that Su Mo was the one who was targeting him. In order to please that old dog Shangwan, you are really trying your best. Qin Chuan looked coldly at the small teleportation portal that had lost its ability to teleport. He was furious. He suddenly waved his hand and released a sharp sword aura. The sword aura slashed the small teleportation portal. The small teleportation portal was cut in half by the sword aura and fell to the ground. Since you don't want me to use this teleportation portal, then don't let anyone else use it. I want to see how you're going to deal with this when things get out of hand. Chapter 694. On the plaza, those who had already passed the assessment were gathered together. From time to time, they would look at a small portal not far away. Every time someone walked out, someone would count them down. As more and more people walked out, the risk of those who had yet to pass the assessment increased. 75 people have already passed the assessment. There are still 25 small portals left. Lucy worriedly looked at the small portal not far away. She had been waiting for that familiar figure to walk out, but she had been disappointed time and time again. She was the last person to come out, and he felt extremely pained. He believed that he had taken away Qin Chuan's opportunity. If Qin Chuan did not pass the assessment in the end, he really did not know how to face everyone. Chen Changxing saw Shiyu's state and sighed. He reached out to pat Shiyu's shoulder and said, "Don't put too much pressure on yourself. You have to believe in the boss. He can already pass the assessment." Shiyu nodded heavily. "I believe in Qin Chuan's strength." Upon hearing Shiyu's words, the expressions on the faces of the onlookers became somewhat subtle. They naturally had great confidence in Qin Chuan's strength. However, seeing that the number of small teleportation doors was decreasing and Qin Chuan still failed to pass the test, it was hard for them not to worry. At this moment, Su Mo's figure suddenly appeared in front of everyone. He looked at everyone with an ashen face and said, "The assessment has ended." Everyone was extremely shocked when they heard Su Mo's words. How could the assessment have ended so suddenly? Only 80 people had passed. Why did the assessment end so suddenly? Yi Qingning frowned as she looked at Su Mo. It seems like only 80 people passed, right? According to the rules, shouldn't there still be 20 small portals left? Shouldn't the assessment only end after all of the portals have expired? Yi Qingning's doubts were the same as everyone else's, especially those from the Black Moon Combat Academy. They were extremely puzzled. Qin Chuan had not even passed the assessment, so how could it end so early? Faced with everyone's doubts, Su Mo's face suddenly turned gloomy. He coldly said, "There was an accident, so the assessment had to end early." Everyone was shocked when they heard Su Mo's explanation. There was an accident in the assessment? What was going on? Just when everyone was feeling puzzled and curious, dozens of figures suddenly appeared on the square. They were the people who had not passed the assessment, and Qin Chuan was among them. Seeing the appearance of these people, the crowd immediately shifted their attention away from Su Mo. One after another, they curiously asked their acquaintances what was going on. "It's this Qin Chuan. We were all implicated by him." Someone roared and vented all their resentment on Qin Chuan, but Qin Chuan accepted it calmly. He did not refute or get angry, as if it had nothing to do with him. Hearing this person's words, those who had already passed the assessment were somewhat puzzled. Could it be that the accident that caused the assessment to end early was Qin Chuan? "Qin Chuan, what's going on?" Yao Rao quickly walked to the side of Qin Chuan and was very puzzled. "Why are they saying that you implicated them?" Yao Rao's question was also the question of everyone present. They really wanted to know what Qin Chuan had done in the ruins of the universe to actually cause the assessment to end early. Qin Chuan faintly smiled and calmly said, "Whenever I got close to the small transmission door would automatically fail, and when I went far away, the small transmission door would return to normal. I felt that there was a problem with the small transmission door, so I took action to repair the small transmission door I encountered, and then this happened." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, everyone was somewhat dumbfounded. There was a problem with the small transmission door? Are you sure the problem didn't appear on your body? For a moment, everyone's gaze involuntarily shifted to Su Mo, who was standing at the side, and the expression on their face also became extremely strange. From Qin Chuan's explanation, they could hear that Qin Chuan was once again targeted by Su Mo. How can this be? Lucy was furious. She naturally understood the meaning of Qin Chuan's words. This was clearly Su Mo deliberately targeting Qin Chuan. Lu Zi was angry, but other people who failed the assessment were even more angry. If it was not for Qin Chuan being targeted, how could they have been directly eliminated? In the end, it was all Qin Chuan's fault. Of course, they could only blame Qinchuan, because they absolutely didn't dare to offend Su Mo, who still held their life and death in his hands. Director Su, shouldn't you explain yourself? Yao Rao turned to look at Su Mo and said in heavy voice, "Don't tell me you don't know about this matter." Su Mo gloomily looked at Yao Rao and coldly said, "Do I need to explain to you? I don't need to explain to anyone." As a matter of fact, Su Mo was also very bitter in his heart. He was indeed targeting Qinchuan and deliberately closed the transmission channel of Small Portal when Qinchuan was near the Small Portal. But what he didn't expect was that after discovering this situation, Qinchuan actually directly destroyed the Small Portal. Originally, when he saw Qinchuan destroying a small portal, he didn't care and only thought that Qinchuan was incompetent and furious. But after Qinchuan destroyed several small portals in succession, he somewhat couldn't sit still. If he allowed Qinchuan to continue like this and destroy too many small portals, then at that time, perhaps someone from above would come to investigate this matter, and once his little tricks were discovered, then he might be in big trouble. At first, Su Mo was still looking forward to other participants of assessment to stop Qinchuan's destruction, but soon he discovered that when Qinchuan didn't aim to pass through the small portal and only destroyed the small portal, then basically no one could stop Qinchuan. When he finally reacted and ended the assessment ahead of time, 18 small portals had already been destroyed by Qinchuan, and only 2 were left intact. At this time, Su Mo was already regretting in his heart. In order to curry favor with Shangwan Yuanhao, he had gotten himself into big trouble. Seeing Su Mo's unyielding attitude, Yao Rao became even more angry in her heart. But when she was about to make trouble, Qinchuan stopped her. "No need to reason with this kind of bootlicker. Justice is in the hearts of people. At worst, I didn't pass the assessment, that's all." Hearing Qinchuan, Yao Rao felt extremely guilty in her heart and said in low voice, "It's all my fault. If not for me tearing up the recommendation letter and occupying a small portal, perhaps you wouldn't have encountered this kind of situation. It's not your fault, no matter how many people we have. When only I am left, what should happen will happen." Qinchuan deeply looked at the ugly complexion of Su Mo. "But if I want to be unlucky, then someone must be unlucky with me." Chapter 695. Hearing Qinchuan's words, Su Mo's cheeks fiercely twitched. He really didn't expect that Qinchuan would actually be so decisive. Seeing that there was no hope of passing the assessment, he actually wanted to forcefully drag him into the water. At this time, other people's gaze towards Su Mo became somewhat pondering. Qinchuan clearly wanted to make Su Mo suffer, but they didn't know whether Su Mo had the ability to handle this matter or not. If Su Mo was really defeated by Qinchuan, then the loss would truly outweigh the gain. Perhaps Shangwan Yuanhao would intervene in this matter. After all, Su Mo was working for him. Just when everyone was thinking about these things, suddenly 2 figures walked in. They directly arrived in front of Su Mo and asked, "You are Su Mo? Come with us." Su Mo looked at the other party who was wearing the uniform of Supervision Department, and his pupils suddenly shrunk. At the same time, his face revealed a somewhat reluctant smile and asked, "Two comrades, may I know what mistake I have committed to be taken away? Don't tell me you don't know in your heart what you have done." The other party coldly snorted, then turned towards the crowd and asked, "Who is Qinchuan?" Hearing the other party calling his name, Qinchuan took a step forward and replied, "I am Qinchuan." The other party sized up Qinchuan, then said with a smile, "You brat have guts, come with us." Qinchuan lightly nodded, then walked towards the other party. At this time, Yao Rao and Lu Zi simultaneously stretched out their hands to stop Qinchuan, and somewhat anxiously said, "Qinchuan, you can't go." Having heard this, Qinchuan faintly smiled, then said to the 2, "You don't need to worry about me. They are very upright people. If I didn't commit any mistake, then I will be sent back very soon." In fact, Qinchuan completely didn't know the origin of these 2 people and whether they were good people or not. He only saw that arrogant and despotic Su Mo didn't even dare to far in front of these 2 people. He clearly knew in his heart that these 2 people were existences that he couldn't afford to provoke at present. so he could only go along with them. This little brother is right. We are good people. The man looked at Qin playfully and said, there aren't many young people as sensible as you these days. I don't mind telling you that we're from the supervision office of the Center of Heirs. We're taking you back to ask about the assessment. If there's no problem, we'll let you go. Hearing the explanation of this person, although Yao Rao and Lu Zi were still worried in their heart, but they also slightly relaxed. Qin comforted the two of them again. Then he walked towards the people from the monitoring department and asked cooperatively, do I need to wear shackles or something like that? When a man heard this, he was immediately amused. Kid, you're quite smart. Seeing that you're so honest, you don't have to wear the shackles anymore. My name is Lu Xing. You could just call me by my name. While speaking, Lu Xing took out a pair of black shackles from his storage ring. After that, he turned his gaze towards Su Mo. The smile on his face gradually disappeared, and his expression became gloomy. After that, he said to Su Mo, we don't need to talk about the reason. Just reach out your hand. Su Mo looked at the shackles in Lu Xing's hand. His face exposed a touch of extreme fear, as if he was facing a wild beast. He was very reluctant to reach out his hand. Seeing this, Lu Xing slightly frowned and said in a heavy voice, what? You want to resist? Hearing Lu Xing's words, Su Mo was thoroughly desperate. He slowly stretched out his hands, and his gaze shifted from the shackles to Qin. Then, the expression on his face suddenly became ferocious, and he angrily said, Qin, if I don't die, I'll definitely kill you. In the face of Su Mo's threat, Qin gently smiled. I hope you still have this opportunity. Although Qin didn't know much about the authority of the supervision department and the significance of the black shackles, he could already tell many things from Su Mo's reaction. After Su Mo put on the black shackles, his aura suddenly became extremely weak, and his face became pale. It was as if his spirit had been sucked away by the black shackles. In an instant, he changed from a robust, middle-aged man to a sickly ghost. Seeing this scene, everyone's face revealed a touch of extreme shock. No wonder Su Mo was terrified when he saw the black shackles, as if he was facing a wild beast. It turned out that the black shackles actually had such a strange function. Qin couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. At this moment, he could be said to be extremely glad. If he hadn't asked that question earlier, perhaps he would also have to wear such shackles. It was simply too terrifying. All right, let's go. Lu Xing turned around and looked at Qin. Follow closely. Qin turned around and looked at Yao Rao and the others. He gave them a reassuring smile before he turned around and left with Lu Xing. They boarded the spacecraft and headed straight to the supervision department. What? Qin was taken away by the supervision department? Si Tang, who was heading to the reception, could not help but frown when she heard the news. She secretly cursed Su Mo for ruining things. Originally, I thought I would still have a chance to fight with you. Now, it seems like there's no hope. Even if you can come out of the supervision department alive, I'm afraid you'll be a cripple. After sighing, Si Tang suddenly lost interest in heading to the reception. Compared to the reception, the supervision department was much more low-key. From the outside, it was impossible to imagine that such a powerful department like the supervision department would be located in such a small place. However, this was only Qin's initial thought. When he actually entered the supervision department, he realized that he was ridiculously wrong. The supervision department actually existed in an independent space within the ruins of the universe. One could only enter through a teleportation door. Seeing how shocked Qin was, Lu Xing chuckled and asked, what do you think? Don't you think it's very majestic? Qin looked at the huge buildings in front of him and nodded. It's indeed very majestic. This doesn't look like a department. It looks more like a city. The supervision department was so huge that one could not see the end of it. All right, it's time to leave now that you've seen it. Lu Xing looked at Qin with pity and said, I've just asked around. The two of you will be temporarily locked up in Prison 7. When Qin heard this, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he turned his head to look at the huge buildings with numbers on them. He asked in astonishment, These marked buildings are prisons. Lu Xing nodded and said, "You're right. These labeled buildings are all prisons. Each prison holds tens of thousands of prisoners. Only when the first prison is full will you be sent to the seventh sword reign." After hearing Lu Xing's explanation, Qin Chuan could not help but feel numb. Did this mean that there were at least 70,000 prisoners in this place? Was he going to be one of them? Chapter 696. Well, didn't you say that you only brought me here to ask about the assessment? There's no need to lock me up in prison, right? For some reason, Qin Chuan had a faint sense of resistance towards prison. He did not want to be locked up in prison. Su Mo, on the other hand, did not seem to be surprised by this. The expression on his face was still that of despair. When the director has time to see you, he will naturally ask you. But before that, you have to obediently stay in prison. Come with us. Lu Xing looked at Qin Chuan with a smile. Don't tell me you won't wear the shackles too. Qin Chuan heard this and followed behind Lu Xing without saying a word. What a joke. Seeing Su Mo's ghostly appearance, he did not want to wear the shackles. Under Lu Xing's lead, Qin Chuan and the others slowly walked towards prison number 7. The closer they got to prison number 7, the more uneasy Qin Chuan felt. But in a place like this, even if he used all his skills, he would not be able to do anything. He could only passively accept the other party's arrangements. Thinking of this, Qin Chuan could not help but clench his fists. At the end of the day, he was still not strong enough. If he was a nascent soul cultivator, or even stronger, perhaps he would not have been targeted like this today and would not have come to the supervision office. Prison number 7 is just up ahead. Lu Xing looked back at Qin Chuan and reminded him, when you go in later, no matter what you see or hear, don't pay attention to it, understand? This is a kind reminder for you. Hearing Lu Xing's kind reminder, Qin Chuan's expression could not help but become a little serious. He looked at the tightly shut prison door in front of him and felt a little curious. What exactly was in prison number 7? Buzz. Accompanied by a buzzing sound, the door of prison number 7 slowly opened. When a gap appeared in the middle of the door, a burst of ghostly wailing and howling suddenly came from inside. Let me out, let me out. I want to see the director. I want to go out. I don't want to die. I'm begging you. I'm really going crazy. I'm dying. Hearing these ghost-like wails, Qin Chuan's face suddenly turned ugly. He seemed to have expected that he would become like this in the near future. Let's go. Lu Xing slowly walked through the door, and Qin Chuan followed closely behind. After seeing the situation behind the door, Qin Chuan was completely stunned. The entire prison number 7 was a hollow, ring-shaped structure with only one big lamp at the top. The atmosphere of the entire prison was strange and gloomy. There were densely packed prison cells in all directions, and in each cell, there was a terrifying ghost-like figure. Some people were wailing, some were banging on the door, and most of them were lifeless corpses lying in the prison cells. This scene had a great impact on Qin Chuan's mind. He could not imagine what kind of torture these people had gone through to become like this. I don't want to be locked up here. I know I'm wrong. Please let me go. At this moment, Su Mo completely broke down. After seeing the miserable state of these people in front of him, he really regretted it. He should not have targeted Qin Chuan in order to please Shangguan Yuanhao. Lu Xing looked back at Su Mo and asked, "What? Are you trying to escape?" Hearing Lu Xing's words, Su Mo's whole body trembled. His spirit had completely withered at this moment, and he was like an old man with one foot in the grave, lifeless. Qin Chuan looked at Su Mo with a complicated gaze and said in a low voice, "Actually, he's just a pitiful worm." "You're right, but what does this have to do with me?" Lu Xing said indifferently, "I'm just following orders. Since he made a mistake, he should be punished." Qin Chuan pursed his lips and asked, "What if the person who made the mistake was a big shot like Shangguan Yuanhao?" Lu Xing sneered and asked Qin Chuan, "Who told you that Shangguan Yuanhao was a big shot? He's just a slightly bigger bug. If he's really a big shot, do you think this guy would appear here?" Hearing Lu Xing's words, Qin Chuan did not know what to say. Shangguan Yuanhao who was strong enough to kill him in a second, was just a slightly bigger worm in the eyes of others. Perhaps only a small worm like Su Mo would respect Shangwan Yuanhao so much. Your room number is 79999. Let's go. Lu Xing brought Qin Chuan to the only elevator in the prison and found room 7991 amidst the screams and curses. In the process of looking for the room, Qin Chuan found that the closer to the room to the back, the better the condition of the people in it. It seemed that these people had been locked up recently, so they had not become like the people below. Lu Xing opened the door to cell 79999 and said to Qin Chuan, "Go in." Qin Chuan looked at the clean and tidy cell and walked in obediently. In fact, he had no choice but to obey. From Sumo's performance, it could be seen that if they tried to escape, their end would be very miserable. When Qin Chuan entered the cell, Lu Xing closed the door and said to Qin Chuan, "Good luck." After saying this, Lu Xing turned and prepared to leave. At this moment, Qin Chuan suddenly called out to him, "I owe you a favor." When Lu Xing heard this, he looked back at Qin Chuan with some surprise. When he saw Qin Chuan shaking his hands, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up slightly. Then he waved at Qin Chuan and left. Qin Chuan watched as Lu Xing left. Only when he could no longer see him did he retract his gaze. He lowered his head to look at his hands and let out a long sigh of relief. He felt extremely fortunate. Just now, he had observed that everyone who was locked up here had a pair of black shackles on their hands. There was no exception except for him. Everyone is a cultivator. With the cultivation of the golden core stage, it wouldn't be a problem even if they didn't eat or drink for a year. But these people have all become like this. It must be related to the black shackles. I'm really lucky that I didn't wear those black shackles. Qin Chuan murmured in a low voice. Suddenly, he felt a pair of eyes watching him. He looked up and just happened to meet a pair of frighteningly bright eyes. "You're very special." A slightly hoarse voice came from the opposite side. The skinny man stared at Qin Chuan's hands as if he was surprised that Qin Chuan wasn't wearing black shackles. Hearing this, Qin Chuan asked curiously, "Is it because I'm not wearing black shackles that you say I'm special?" The man nodded stiffly and said, "It's called the devil lock. It's something that only a real devil can research." Chapter 697. Qin Chuan glanced at the black shackles on Qiu Zhe's wrists and whispered, "So it's called the devil's lock. My name is Qiu Zhe. My name is Qin Chuan." Qin Chuan looked at Qiu Zhe sitting across from him and asked curiously, "How long have you been locked up? When will the director see you?" Other than Su Mo, who was locked up with Qin Chuan, there was only Qiu Zhe sitting across from him. That was to say, according to the order, the director had to see Qiu Zhe first. So if he could find out when Qiu Zhe would see the director, he could calculate the approximate time he would leave here. Hearing Qin Chuan's question, Qiu Zhe looked at Qin Chuan strangely and said in a low voice, "You asked a very strange question." Qin Chuan was slightly stunned and asked in confusion, "What's strange about it? You're the first person who wants to see the director after being locked up here." Qiu Zhe glanced at Qin Chuan quietly. "This is the 4th year I've been locked up here. Not to mention the director, I haven't even seen the people at the bottom of the supervisory department." Qin Chuan looked at Qiu Zhe with astonishment. "You've been locked up here for 4 years and haven't seen the director? How could this be? You're still young and don't know anything. You must be a newcomer who's here to take the heir of Kunlun Field exam this year." Qiu Zhe had an ugly smile on his face. "You're really something to be locked up here as soon as you arrive at the center of Kunlun Field." At this time, Qin Chuan could no longer keep his cool. He asked Qiu Zhe seriously, "Senior, can you explain the situation here to me in detail?" Qiu Zhe grinned and said to Qin Chuan, "Do you know why we're in the 7th prison?" Qin Chuan thought for a moment, then replied, "Because the first 6 prisons are already full?" Qiu Zhe nodded and said to Qin Chuan, "You're right. There are a total of 10 prisons in the supervision department. Only when the first one is full will the next one be opened. We're the 7th one, which means that there are 60,000 people in front of us. Even if we exclude those who have died, there's still about 40,000 people left." Hearing this number, Qin Chuan seemed to have thought of something, and the expression on his face suddenly became ugly. He couldn't help but ask, "Senior, are you trying to tell me that the director will meet us one by one in order?" If that was really the case, then wouldn't his number be at least 40,000? Xiao smiled strangely and said to Qin Chuan, "That's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that the director only sees one prisoner every day and doesn't work overtime on weekends." This time, Qin Chuan was completely stunned. According to Xiao, wouldn't he have to wait almost 70,000 days before he could see the director? 70,000 days, that was nearly 200 years. Seeing Qin Chuan stunned on the spot, Xiao was not surprised at all. When he first found out about this situation, he almost went crazy. Qin Chuan's performance was already considered relatively calm. "You're a little better than us. At least you're not wearing a devil lock." Xiao smiled. "Maybe you can live until the day you see the director." This sounded like good news, but Qin Chuan was not happy at all. If he was really in prison here for 200 years, he would definitely go crazy. No, maybe he would go crazy in just 100 years. Is there no way to get out of here as soon as possible? Qin Chuan asked anxiously. Is there any other way besides waiting? He still had so many important things to do. There were so many people outside who cared about him and missed him. He absolutely could not be imprisoned here like this. He had to find a way out. Of course there is. Xiao smiled and said to Qin Chuan, "As long as you have a strong enough background in the Air Center, as long as the important person is willing to take the risk for you, then you may be able to see the director and leave here in advance. However, this depends on how serious the mistake you made is. Take me, for example. I accidentally damaged a public spacecraft and was unable to pay for the repair costs, so I was locked up." Qin Chuan's expression suddenly became ugly. He said in a low voice, "When I participated in the assessment, I destroyed 18 small teleportation portals." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Xiao was stunned. He stared at Qin Chuan with wide eyes for a long time before saying, "Awesome." Looking at Xiao's shocked expression, Qin Chuan smiled bitterly and asked, "The mistake I made must be very serious, right? Do you know how much resources it costs to build a small teleportation portal? Not to mention repairing a public spacecraft. It's more than enough to buy a brand new one. Unless someone in the House of Lords wants to protect you, you can forget about getting out of here for the rest of your life." What is the House of Lords? The House of Lords is the highest authority in the Air Center. Everyone who can enter the House of Lords is at least a terrifying existence in the late stage of the nascent soul stage. And the Speaker of the House of Lords is a cultivator in the peak stage of the nascent soul stage. He is the sky of the Air Center. Qin Chuan could not help but fall silent. He was just a small character with no background. It was simply a dream for him to get the help of a member of the House of Lords in the Air Center. Seeing Qin Chuan's silence, Xiao sighed and said, "Boy, don't even think about getting out of here. You can't get out of here for the rest of your life unless you get a general pardon, but that's too difficult." Hearing Xiao's words, Qin Chuan asked in a low voice, "What's a general pardon?" Xiao explained to Qin Chuan, "When a cultivator in the peak stage of the nascent soul stage appears in the Air Center, the whole world will celebrate, and there will be a general pardon. Prisoners like us who are locked up here will be able to see the light of day again. But this condition is too harsh. You have to know that the last time a cultivator in the peak stage of the nascent soul stage appeared in the Air Center was 700 years ago. At least before I came in, I didn't hear of any member of the House of Lords who had the hope of breaking through to the peak stage of the nascent soul stage. Thank you for answering my question, Senior." Qin Chuan pursed his lips and did not ask any more questions. He turned and walked to the open space in the center of the cell, sat down cross-legged, and began to cultivate. Seeing Qin Chuan begin to cultivate, Xiao couldn't help but have a subtle look in his eyes. Qin Chuan was definitely the first person who could cultivate peacefully in such a place. However, in his opinion, Qin Chuan's calmness was only temporary. It wouldn't be long before Qin Chuan lost his patience and broke down. He wanted to see how long Qin Chuan would have his first emotional breakdown after being locked up, and how long it would take for him to settle down again. However, what Xiaozhe did not expect was that Qin Xuan did not move at all after cultivating for a whole month. Chapter 698. Phew. Qin Xuan gently exhaled a mouthful of turbid qi and then slowly opened his eyes. An extremely bright light shot out from the bottom of his eyes, as sharp as lightning. It had been a long time since he had cultivated peacefully like this. Now that he had calmed down, the results of his cultivation were quite good. Boy, you're doing very well. Xiaozhe's voice suddenly came from the opposite cell. He looked at Qin Xuan with a surprised expression. Qin Xuan smiled and said to Xiaozhe, when I was outside, I had to run around for all kinds of things every day. I rarely had time to cultivate peacefully. Now that I'm locked up in a place where I can't see the sun, I can cultivate peacefully. Qin Xuan didn't know whether he should be happy or sad about this. It was naturally a good thing to be able to cultivate peacefully. However, if he could only cultivate peacefully and couldn't do anything else, then this kind of life would be too despairing. Even if he cultivated to the nascent soul realm here, what was the use? In the end, he was just a prisoner who might never see the sun again in this life. Xiaozhe took a deep look at Qin Xuan and said, I thought you would collapse in 3 days at most. I didn't expect you to cultivate continuously for 2 months after the end of the first month to replenish some nutrients. You're really amazing. Hearing Xiaozhe's words, Qin Xuan's expression couldn't help but become a little complicated. He had been locked up here for 3 months. During these 3 months, he could only hear the occasional wailing from Su Mo and Si Xiaozhe. In such an environment, what could he do other than cultivate peacefully? Seeing the change in Qin Xuan's expression, Xiaozhe smiled and asked, Do you have a girlfriend? Qin Xuan was stunned for a moment and then answered, Yes. Xiaozhe laughed and said to Qin Xuan, Your girlfriend should also be one of the candidates for the heir of Kunlun field examination with you, right? I guess it won't take long for her to fall in love with someone else when she knows you're locked up here. Qin Xuan took a deep look at Xiaozhe and shook his head. I won't let that happen. She won't do that either. Things are unpredictable. Xiaozhe looked at Qin Xuan. Maybe she can wait for you for a year or even 10 years, but what about 100 years? 200 years? When you get out, do you think you're still worthy of her? Maybe by then, you'll be a prisoner's heir of Kunlun Field, and you'll be released. Hearing of Xiaozhe's words, Qin Xuan's, and asked Xiaozhe, Of course, of Qin Xuan of Kunlun. No, I just hope that you can see the truth clearly and don't let your imagination run wild because of these things. Xiaozhe chuckled. I still hope that you can persist for a longer period of time. Thank you for your kindness. Qin Xuan pursed his lips. If there's nothing else, I'll continue to practice. Suit yourself. Xiaozhe looked at Qin Xuan. I'll just quietly watch you practice. Excuse me, uncle. Do you have time now? Looking at the elegant secretary standing in front of her, Yao Rao nervously asked. Seeing Yao Rao's haggard appearance, the secretary sighed and said, Princess Yao, don't make things difficult for the senator. He's just one of the hundreds of senators in the lower house. He has no right to intervene in the affairs of supervision department. Yao Rao was somewhat anxious, but Qin Xuan really didn't make any big mistake. He's just fighting back against Su Mo. The secretary helplessly said, he can choose many ways to fight back, but he chose the most dangerous one. The senator has the will, but is powerless. Hearing the secretary, Yao Rao wanted to say something, but the secretary waved her hand and said, I'm sorry, I still have work to do, so I won't talk about it. Goodbye. Finished speaking, the secretary turned around and left, not giving Yao Rao a chance to speak again. Upon seeing this, Yao Rao took 2 steps forward wanting to chase after the secretary, but her outstretched hand was finally put down. Yao Rao was muddle-headed. She didn't know how she walked out of the administrative building of the lower house. The moment she walked out of the door, what greeted her was Lu Zi's face, which was filled with nervousness. How is it? Did your uncle agree to help? Facing Lu Zi's inquiry, Yao Rao bitterly shook her head and said in a low voice, I'm sorry, I didn't see him. Since the first day they learned that Qin Xuan was imprisoned in the monitoring office, both of them had already run here dozens of times. But every time, she wasn't able to see that uncle. Every time, she was rejected by the secretary with all kinds of reasons. And every time she came here in high spirits, only to return in disappointment. Hearing Yao Rao's answer, Lu Zi's complexion quickly became unsightly. She forced a smile and said to Yao Rao, "This is not your fault. It's us who don't have the ability. If they had the ability, then they wouldn't need to go everywhere to ask for help. They could directly go to the door to ask for help. After all, because they didn't have the strength, they didn't have enough right to speak, so they had no choice but to run around everywhere to ask for help. In these 3 months, Lu Zi already didn't know how many people wanted to take advantage of her on the grounds that they could save Qin Xuan. Every time she said that as long as they could see Qin Xuan, they could do whatever they wanted, but the other party would always use all kinds of reasons to refuse. The more it was like this, the more Lu Zi realized how dangerous Qin Xuan's current situation was. Now they were no longer the newbies who had just entered the Kunlun World's Air Center. They already had a general understanding of the Kunlun World's Air Center. Qin Xuan was imprisoned in the monitoring office, this kind of place that made people tremble with fear. They really couldn't feel at ease. "Little Z, I don't want to ask for help." Yao Rao raised her eyes and looked at Lu Zi. "I want to practice hard, practice hard." Hearing Yao Rao's words, Lu Zi's complexion suddenly became pale and said in a low voice, "You want to give up? I don't want to give up. I want to rely on my own efforts to save Qin Xuan." Yao Rao clenched her teeth. They're all afraid of the monitoring office. They see the monitoring office as a devil's den. But I'm not afraid. I won't give up. Wait until the day I succeed in my practice. If Qin Xuan is still alive, I will definitely save him. If Qin Xuan, I will definitely help him fulfill his wish and overturn all those people who killed him, including the monitoring office. I, Yao Rao, swear, if I violate this promise in the future, I won't die a good death. Hearing Yao Rao's resolute vow, Lu Zi's eyes gradually burned with a blazing flame. She clenched her teeth and said, "I, Lu Zi, swear I will definitely meet Qin Xuan in this life, whether it is in the human world or in the underground world." Yao Rao and Lu Zi looked at each other and saw the firm belief and will in each other's eyes. Chapter 699. After staying in the same environment for a long time, one's concept of time would become blurry. However, Qin Xuan was different because he could receive a medium nutrition potion through the machine every day to maintain his energy consumption for the day. Today was Qin Xuan's 900th time receiving a medium nutrition potion. In other words, he had been in prison number 7 for 900 days. Nearly 3 years had passed. In the past 3 years, Qiu Zhe had been waiting for Qin Xuan's emotional breakdown. However, Qin Xuan had always maintained a good mental state. He was either cultivating or thinking about cultivation every day. His realm had also increased from the early gold core stage to the middle gold core stage. He was even about to break through to the late gold core stage. Qiu Zhe had seen all the changes that had happened to Qin Xuan. He really admired Qin Xuan. A person who could cultivate like this for nearly 3 years without collapsing could be called a cultivator. "Kid, you're cultivating so hard. Are you planning to advance to the nascent soul stage and then kill your way out?" Qiu Zhe was very curious about the motivation behind Qin Xuan's hard work. In a place like this where there were no cultivation resources and no cultivation equipment, what he could gain from cultivating for 3 years was not even comparable to what others could gain from cultivating outside for a year. What was the use of working hard? Hearing Qiu Zhe's words, Qin Xuan smiled and said to Qiu Zhe, "To tell you the truth, I'd like to see if they will continue to lock me up on the day I undergo the thunder tribulation of the nascent soul stage." "Ha, what an interesting idea." Qiu Zhe laughed and said to Qin Xuan, "The supervision department has been established for so many years. You're probably the first person to have such an idea." When others were locked up in the supervision department, they would be in a state of panic every day. Not to mention the tribulation transcendence tribulation, it would be good if they could cultivate peacefully for a day or two. Qin Chuan, on the other hand, had been here for 3 years. Every time he cultivated, he would spend 3 years cultivating. Others were thinking about how to pardon the world as soon as possible so that they could leave this devil's den. But Qin Chuan was thinking of using the tribulation, transcendence, tribulation, transcendence, tribulation, transcendence, tribulation to destroy this prison. One couldn't compare with another. The difference was too great. Qin Chuan smiled as he said to Qiu Zhe, "There's no other way. This is the only normal way I can think of to leave this place." That's right, it was the normal way. In Qin Chuan's opinion, waiting for the director to meet him was completely a gamble. It was like a joke and was not credible at all. Hee, if you ask me. Rumble. At this moment, a violent roar came from outside. Hearing this, Qin Chuan and Qiu Zhe both looked outside, but unfortunately, there was an iron wall blocking their view, so they couldn't see anything. Did someone break out of prison? Qiu Zhe was stunned. Why did this sound like thunder? Could there really be someone who had the same idea as Qin Chuan and wanted to escape by transcending the tribulation? Qin Chuan was also very curious, but they couldn't see anything. However, they soon heard other sounds. It seemed like some creature was crying, and the sound was somewhat like a wolf's howl. Hearing this sound, Qin Chuan didn't notice anything, but Qiu Zhe's expression suddenly changed. He exclaimed, "Star Beast! It's the sound of a star beast." Qin Chuan looked at Qiu Zhe in surprise and asked, "Star Beast? Why would a star beast appear here?" Qiu Zhe quickly explained to Qin Chuan, "Star beasts have the ability to travel through the universe. They can go anywhere they want. The star beast must have discovered the ruins of the universe where the monitoring department is located, so it came here." At this moment, the faint sounds of battle came from outside. Qiu Zhe immediately said to Qin Chuan, "This is the first time I've encountered such a situation." Qin Chuan looked at Qiu Zhe subtly and asked, "The star beast is attacking the monitoring department. Do we have a chance of leaving here?" Qiu Zhe was stunned for a moment. Then he looked deeply at Qin Chuan and said, "Yes, but the chances are very small." At this moment, the dim light in the corridor suddenly dimmed completely. At the same time, the electromagnetic field on the cell door disappeared. Qin Chuan was stunned when he saw this. Qiu Zhe, who was opposite him, had already reached out his hand to touch the cell door. Click! Qiu Zhe pushed gently and the cell door opened. Qiu Zhe's face immediately revealed an extremely excited expression when he saw this. He shouted in surprise, "The door is open! The door is open!" Qin Chuan looked at the scene in front of him in shock. He was still wondering what was going on when an extremely sharp howl suddenly came from not far away. Hearing this, Qin Chuan's expression changed slightly. The star beast had actually charged in. Qin Chuan pushed open the cell door without hesitation and came to the corridor. He looked ahead and could vaguely see a calf-sized figure slowly walking over. "Qin Chuan, don't leave me behind. Take me with you." Qiu Zhe looked at Qin Chuan anxiously, afraid that Qin Chuan would leave him alone. Although the cell door had been opened, he was still wearing the devil lock. Qin Chuan looked nervously at the star beast that was getting closer and closer to him. He slowly took out his exclusive battle armor from his storage ring. If he wanted to leave this place, he had to kill the star beast in front of him. At this moment, Qiu Zhe had also discovered the existence of the star beast. His pupils suddenly shrank, and he whispered, "It's actually the most ferocious wild wolf star beast." This kind of star beast is extremely aggressive, bloodthirsty, and cruel. They always move in packs. There must be more wild wolves outside. For a moment, Qiu Zhe did not want to leave this place. Compared to the outside filled with wild wolves, the prison was safer. What weakness does it have? Qin Chuan bowed slightly, ready to fight. It has no weakness. If you want to kill a wild wolf, you have to be stronger than it. Awoo! At this moment, the wild wolf howled and charged at Qin Chuan. Its huge body appeared in front of Qin Chuan in an instant. It opened its mouth and spat out a purple ball of light at Qin Chuan. Rumble. The ball of light fiercely hit the wall, leaving a hideous mark on it. Whoosh! Qingchuan's figure suddenly appeared beside the wild wolf. The cross-wavy blade in his hand slashed at the wild wolf's waist. However, the incomparably sharp cross-wavy blade was unable to penetrate the wild wolf's waist and abdomen. It actually only left a shallow mark on the wild wolf's waist and abdomen. Seeing this, Qingchuan's pupil shrank, and he quickly retreated. At the same time, another purple ball of light hit the place where Qingchuan was previously standing, leaving a deep hole in the ground. Moonlight slash. Qingchuan waved his hand and sent 3 moonlight slashes at the wild wolf. The moonlight slashes hit the wild wolf one after another, but even so, they did not cause any damage to the wild wolf. Chapter 700. Bang! 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 Although the barbarian wolf wasn't injured by Qingchuan's continuous attacks, it was still enraged. It continuously spat out 3 purple light balls at Qingchuan, but they were all dodged by the tense Qingchuan. I have to think of a way to kill it. If I can't kill it from the outside, then I'll kill it from the inside. Qingchuan looked deeply at the barbarian wolf before putting away the cross-wavy sword in his hand and starting to inscribe a talisman array. The barbarian wolf seemed to have sensed the existence of danger and suddenly charged at Qingchuan. At this moment, Qingchuan had just finished inscribing the talisman array and activated the power of the talisman array. Lightning Manipulation Talisman Array. Qingchuan shouted in a low voice. Under his control, the Lightning Manipulation Talisman Array released the power of thunder and lightning. It transformed into an extremely fine lightning needle that pierced towards the barbarian wolf at lightning speed. It shot into the barbarian wolf's body through the barbarian wolf's open mouth. Explode for me, Qingchuan shouted angrily. The extremely compressed lightning needle exploded within the barbarian wolf's body. The berserk power of thunder almost instantly destroyed the barbarian wolf's internal organs, causing the barbarian wolf's aura to wither in an instant. Upon seeing this, Qingchuan didn't hesitate to pull out the cross-wavy sword once again. He pierced the sword through the barbarian wolf's eyes and directly into its head. After doing all this, Qingchuan originally thought that the barbarian wolf was dead. However, the barbarian wolf that he nailed to the ground suddenly let out a low roar of anger, giving Qingchuan a fright. Star beasts are immortal. You must extract the star stone from its body before it dies. The star stone is in its stomach. Qingchuan's slightly excited voice came from not far away, reminding Qingchuan of how to kill the barbarian wolf. When Qingchuan heard this, he immediately inscribed another lightning control talisman formation and transformed the lightning energy into a long whip that extended into the barbarian wolf's mouth. Very quickly, he discovered a stone that emitted starlight within the barbarian wolf's stomach. Presumably, it was the star stone. Qingchuan used his whip to bind the star stone, and then he suddenly pulled it out. At the instant the star stone left Man Lang's body, Man Lang's aura instantly dispersed, and he died in the blink of an eye. Qingchuan glanced at the corpse of the barbaric wolf on the ground. Then he looked at the fist-sized starstone in his hand and said in a low voice, "So this is a starstone. You actually killed a barbaric wolf single-handedly." Jose slowly walked over. He looked at the starstone in Qingchuan's hand with a look of disbelief on his face. Hearing this, Qingchuan asked curiously, "Are the barbarian wolves very strong?" The barbaric wolf is one of the strongest known star beasts. It's almost impossible for a golden core cultivator to kill a barbaric wolf alone. At least 4 people are needed to kill it. However, barbaric wolves always move in groups and rarely go alone, so the number of barbaric wolves that are killed can be said to be very few. Just the corpse of the barbaric wolf under your feet can definitely be sold for a sky-high price at the auction house. Hearing Qiu Zei's explanation, Qingchuan asked curiously, "What's the benefit of this barbaric wolf's corpse?" Qiu Zei patiently explained to Qingchuan, "When the barbaric wolf is alive, its body is very strong, but when it dies, its body will soften. It's a kind of top-grade ingredient, and it has an extremely good nourishing effect for body refiners. Even if a person who doesn't train his body consumes it, it will have the effect of strengthening the body, and the effect is immediate. Also, the starstone in your hand, to be honest, this is the first time I've seen such a large starstone at such a close distance. This is definitely a second-grade starstone. It's enough for you to live a good life in the center of the Kunlun realm for at least a month. Hearing this, Qin Xuan put away the starstone and the barbaric wolf's corpse. Then he looked outside and asked Xiaozhe, "What do you plan to do now? Are you going to follow me or stay here? Let me tell you in advance, I can't always protect you. If you encounter any danger, I will abandon you. If you say that you will definitely protect me, I will find it strange." Xiaozhe looked deeply at Qin Xuan and said, "I'll go with you. If you encounter any danger, you can escape by yourself." Xiaozhe had a premonition that if he didn't leave with Qin Xuan now, perhaps he would have to stay here for the rest of his life. Hearing this, Qin Xuan didn't say anything. He grabbed Xiaozhe's shoulder and jumped down from the platform behind him. Before he landed, he saw many barbaric wolves. These barbaric wolves were wantonly attacking the prisoners that escaped from the prison. No one could escape the attacks of these barbaric wolves. When Xiaozhe saw this scene, he was very glad that he made the decision to leave with Qin Xuan. If he continued to stay here, he would definitely die in the mouths of these barbaric wolves. Bang! Qin Xuan landed on the ground and looked at the prison door that was already opened. His figure flashed and rushed out. When he arrived outside, Qin Xuan was stunned by the scene in front of him. The sky was filled with barbaric wolves running everywhere, attacking all the creatures that they encountered. The entire monitoring department had become a paradise for barbaric wolves. No one could escape from their mouths. Why are there so many of them? Xiaozhe saw the thousands of barbaric wolves, and his legs went soft. Such a huge pack of barbaric wolves must have a barbaric wolf king. Who cares if there is a barbaric wolf king or not? Let's run first. Qin Xuan didn't want to stand there and attract the attention of so many barbaric wolves. His figure flashed as he rushed towards the entrance in his memory. When he approached the entrance, he saw that the monitoring department's troops were engaged in an intense battle with the barbaric wolves. Among them was Lu Xing's figure. When he saw that Lu Xing was surrounded by two barbaric wolves and was in danger, Qin Xuan frowned slightly. With a whoosh, he arrived near the monitoring department's troops and said to Xiaozhe, "I'm going to save someone. You think of a way to survive." After saying this, Qin Xuan turned around and rushed towards Lu Xing's location. Damn it! Why are there so many barbaric wolves? Lu Xing looked at the two ferocious barbaric wolves in front of him with a face full of despair. He had fought with astral beasts dozens of times, but this was the first time he fought with barbaric wolves. He was no match for the barbaric wolves at all. If it wasn't for the monitoring department's protective shield, he would have been a dead man by now. Even so, he didn't have the chance to escape because the cunning barbaric wolves had already blocked the exit. With his strength, even if he joined forces with the others, they wouldn't be able to escape. Just as Lu Xing clenched his teeth and prepared to perish together with one of the barbaric wolves, a white armor suddenly descended from the sky and ruthlessly pressed down on one of the barbaric wolves. The white armor barbarically pried open the barbaric wolf's mouth and actually dug out the astral stone from the barbaric wolf's stomach. When he saw this scene, Lu Xing was completely stunned. He never thought that the barbaric wolves, which were almost invincible in his eyes, would be killed in such a simple and crude way. This completely overturned his understanding of the world. While Lu Xing was still in shock, the white armor rushed towards the other barbaric wolf. Although it was obstructed to a certain extent, the way it took out the astral stone was still simple and crude. In just a few breaths of time, the two barbaric wolves were killed. Chapter 701. Lu Xing was dumbstruck as he stared at Qin Xuan, who was standing not too far away. His entire being was stupefied. Were these two-star beasts really barbaric wolves? How did they get killed so easily? While Lu Xing was still in a daze, Qin Xuan had already arrived beside him. He said to Lu Xing, "What are you still standing there for? Let's go." Hearing Qin Chuan's familiar voice, Lu Xing couldn't recall where he had heard this voice before. He could only follow behind Qin Chuan in a panic. With Qin Chuan leading the way, they quickly joined up with the rest of the group. Relying on their powerful weapons, they temporarily resisted the attacks of the barbaric wolves. Lu Xing was still in a state of shock as he looked at the pack of barbaric wolves in the distance. He said to Qin Chuan beside him, "If it wasn't for you, I might have died. Thank you so much." Qin Chuan chuckled. "No need to thank me. After all, I owe you a favor." While speaking, Qin Chuan had already walked out of the battle armor, revealing his face in front of Lu Xing. When he saw Qin Chuan's appearance, Lu Xing was stunned for a moment. He said with some disbelief, "It's actually you. Are you surprised?" Qin Chuan laughed. "Originally, I was fine in the cell. However, the cell's energy supply was suddenly cut off. Coupled with the attacks of the barbaric wolves, I could only defend myself. Speaking of which, I really have to thank you for not putting the devil lock on me. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have had the strength to fight with these barbaric wolves." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Lu Xing looked at Qin Chuan with a complicated gaze. If it wasn't for him not putting the devil lock on Qin Chuan, then today, Qin Chuan wouldn't have saved him. In the end, it was him who saved himself. At this time, the survivors of the inspection department had basically gathered and formed a battle formation to stop the attacking barbaric wolves. Qin Chuan looked at the surrounding barbaric wolves and asked Lu Xing curiously, "What's going on?" Lu Xing laughed bitterly when he heard this, and then he said to Qin Chuan, "A group of wild wolves that wandered through the starry sky unintentionally discovered this ruin of the universe that we were in, and then they charged in. We were caught off guard and were defeated. If it were other star beasts, the inspection department wouldn't have been defeated so quickly. However, these star beasts were the most ferocious barbaric wolves. This made it difficult for the people of the inspection department, who were unprepared, to organize an effective defense and counterattack." "Why didn't you ask the inspection department?" Qin Chuan, Lu Xing, and the inspection department's strength shouldn't be this weak. At this time, Qin Chuan could see that there were only about 100 people in the inspection department, and most of them were injured. Was the inspection department, which made people in the inspection department tremble in fear, only this strong? You only see the people left behind in the inspection department. The elites of the inspection department have all gone to the inspection department to carry out missions. However, we have sent an emergency request for help to the director. I believe the director will bring people back soon," Lu Xing said to Qin Chuan helplessly. "But before that, we have to hold on." Qin Chuan frowned slightly and said to Lu Xing, "Don't you think this is too much of a coincidence? Your director had just left with his men when you were attacked. I suspect that someone deliberately lured these star beasts here." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Lu Xing's expression changed slightly. He asked, "Are you saying that someone wants to kill with a borrowed knife?" "This is just my guess. I just think this accident is too much of a coincidence." Qin Chuan pursed his lips and said, "In the past, I often encountered all kinds of accidental attacks. Later, it was confirmed that these accidents were basically man-made. It doesn't matter if this is man-made or not. When this matter is over, we will definitely get to the bottom of it." Lu Xing said to Qin Chuan, "I will explain the situation to the director. Maybe you will be released." Qin Chuan grinned. "That would be great." Boom! Just as the two were talking, an earth-shattering roar suddenly erupted from the right wing of the main force. It turned out that the brute wolves had gathered their firepower and attacked the right wing, knocking it down. Seeing this, Lu Xing was shocked and exclaimed, "Oh no, those brute wolves want to attack the portal. They want to cut off our connection with the outside world." Hearing Lu Xing's words, Qin Chuan frowned and said in a low voice, "These brute wolves are a little too smart." While speaking, Qin Chuan had already re-entered his battle armor and was ready for battle. It was also at this time that the brute wolves had completely destroyed the right wing and occupied the only path to the portal. We can't let these brute wolves destroy the portal. Once we lose contact with the outside world, this place will become a land of death. Lu Xing quickly said to Qin Chuan, "We must stop them." Hearing this, Qin Chuan asked Lu Xing, "So what should we do now?" To catch bandits, first catch the leader. Lu Xing suddenly turned his head and looked into the distance. Find the brute wolf king and force him to gather these brute wolves back. Qin Chuan looked at Lu Xing in astonishment and asked, "Do you think I'm a match for the brute wolf king, or do you think you're a match for the brute wolf king?" Although Qin Chuan seemed to have easily killed the two brute wolves, that was because he had caught them off guard and his methods were straightforward. If he really faced the brute wolves head-on, facing 3 brute wolves at the same time was Qin Chuan's limit. Moreover, Qin Chuan didn't believe that the brute wolf king's strength was only equivalent to 3 ordinary brute wolves added together. Not to mention that the brute wolf king definitely had many guards by his side. Lu Xing's eyes flickered as if he was hesitating. However, when he thought of the consequences of losing the portal, he gritted his teeth and said to Qin Chuan, "I know a way to kill the brute wolf king." When Qin Chuan heard Lu Xing's words, he asked curiously, "What method do you have?" "I once saw a weapon in the director's office. With that weapon and your battle armor, we can definitely kill the brute wolf king." Lu Xing looked deeply at Qin Chuan. "This is a secret. I should know about it." When he heard Lu Xing's words, Qin Chuan frowned and said, "Let's not think about this now. If we don't kill these brute wolves, we'll all die. Even if there's any punishment, we have to be alive first. I'll show you the way. Follow me." Lu Xing stood up and pointed to the west. He said to Qin Chuan, "The director's office is over there." When Qin Chuan saw this, he grabbed Lu Xing without hesitation and flew in the direction Lu Xing pointed to. Although there were brute wolves attacking them along the way, Qin Chuan dodged all of them. The two of them quickly arrived outside the building where the director's office was located. However, they were stopped by a pack of brute wolves that were eyeing them covetously. Chapter 702. Looks like we won't be able to enter without killing these guys. Qin Chuan looked at the 6 barbaric wolves in front of him and couldn't help but feel a headache. These guys were too difficult to deal with. In comparison, he would rather face 10 cultivators of the same realm. Seeing this, Lu Xing clenched his teeth and said to Qin Chuan, "I'll hold these barbaric wolves back. You go find that weapon. The director's office is on the top floor." Qin Chuan was speechless when he heard this and said, "Forget it. I don't know." Before Qin Chuan could finish his words, the 6 barbaric wolves had already pounced forward impatiently. They roared and spat out several purple balls of light at Qin Chuan and Lu Xing. The rumbling sounds were incessant. Qin Chuan and Lu Xing dashed left and right under the attacks of the barbaric wolves. Although they weren't hit, they couldn't move an inch. There was no way for them to break through the defense of the barbaric wolves and enter the building. Qin Chuan frowned and asked Lu Xing, "Can we break through the wall from the outside?" It was too difficult to break through the blockade of the barbaric wolves. "No, the building's automatic defense system will treat us as intruders and directly attack us." Hearing Lu Xing's answer, Qin Chuan felt a headache. No wonder he saw these barbaric wolves walking through the door so obediently. It turned out that this building had an automatic defense system. "We have to kill our way in from the front. There's no other way." Lu Xing looked at Qin Chuan. "If things don't work out, you can retreat by yourself." Now that the one being attacked by the astral beast was their monitoring department, Qin Chuan, as a prisoner of the monitoring department, didn't cause trouble for them at this time was already very good. If he still had extravagant hopes that Qin Chuan would fight to the death for them, then he would be too immoral. Qin Chuan fiercely clenched his teeth and said to Lu Xing, "I don't care what method you use. Block these barbaric wolves for me, and buy me 30 seconds. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Lu Xing nodded heavily and said to Qin Chuan, "Even if I die, I'll hold them back for 30 seconds. When he heard Lu Xing's words, Qin Chuan didn't hesitate any longer. He immediately took out a talisman brush and a disc array and prepared to inscribe the 10-directional lightning prison. Now, he could only hope that the might of the 10-directional lightning prison could threaten these barbaric wolves. Otherwise, he really had no other way. Just as Qin Chuan was preparing to inscribe the glyph array and Lu Xing was preparing to charge forward, The little armor dragon that had been sleeping on the Yao core in Qinchuan's brain suddenly woke up in a daze. It twitched its adorable nose as if it had smelled something enticing and suddenly became spirited. With a whoosh, it flew out of Qinchuan's brain and charged straight towards the barbaric wolves in front of it. Lu Xing only saw a golden light flash through the sky, and in the next moment, the 6 barbaric wolves in front of him fell to the ground while howling in grief. All of their bodies were shriveled, as if their flesh and blood essence had been sucked dry. Seeing this scene, Lu Xing was dumbfounded. He turned to Qin Chuan and asked, "Did you do this?" It didn't even take 30 seconds, right? Qin Chuan was also a little dumbfounded. He didn't expect the little armored dragon to suddenly wake up at this time. And even more so, he didn't expect the little armored dragon to eat the barbaric wolves. It was simply a glutton. The little armored dragon, who had eaten its fill, had already returned to Qin Chuan's brain with satisfaction. With a plop, it laid on Qin Chuan's Yao core and fell asleep again. Seeing the little armored dragon's performance, Qin Chuan's expression could be said to be quite interesting. Originally, he was counting on the little armored dragon to be able to kill everyone. Now, it seemed that this fellow had no fighting strength after eating its fill. Facing Lu Xing's question, Qin Chuan could only cough lightly and say, "This is a secret technique of mine. I can only use it once in a long time." I understand. When Lu Xing heard Qin Chuan say it was a secret technique, he immediately stopped asking. He turned to Qin Chuan and said, "Quickly go and collect the Star Stone. We'll go in quickly." Hearing this, Qin Chuan immediately went forward to check the barbaric wolf's stomach. Sure enough, he found the Star Stone inside. This made Qin Chuan overjoyed. Originally, he thought the little armor dragon would eat the Star Stone. He didn't expect it to leave the Star Stone for him. Qin Chuan quickly collected the Star Stone and rushed into the building with Lu Xing. Although there were some barbaric wolves in the building, under Lu Xing's lead, the two easily avoided these barbaric wolves and reached the top of the building with the fastest speed. Qin Chuan looked at the tightly shut office door and said to Lu Xing, "If we use brute force to break the door, will the automatic defense system attack us?" "No. The building's energy supply has already been cut off by the barbaric wolves. The building's automatic defense system and the energy used by the door are not of the same source." While speaking, Lu Xing had already walked to the door. He raised his hand and fiercely punched the door. The door issued a rumbling sound, but there were no signs of it being broken. Not even the slightest trace was left behind. "Get out of the way, let me do it." Qin Chuan asked Lu Xing to get out of the way. He raised his hand and waved a moonlight slash. With the sharpness of the moonlight slash, it only left a deep mark on the door. Seeing this, Qin Chuan continuously waved a few more moonlight slashes. Finally, a hole big enough for one person to pass through was open on the door. Qin Chuan put away the battle armor and climbed into the office with Lu Xing. An extremely enchanting fragrance assaulted his face. Smelling this fragrance, the corner of Qin Chuan's mouth rose slightly. He said to Lu Xing, "Looks like your director has been meeting a lot of women here." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Lu Xing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said to Qin Chuan, "Don't think too much. Our director is a woman." Qin Chuan heard this and looked at Lu Xing in astonishment. He said in disbelief, "A woman?" Lu Xing nodded and said to Qin Chuan, "That's right, a woman. What, you don't think the director is a ferocious man, do you? To tell you the truth, our director is very beautiful. She's definitely more beautiful than you can imagine." While speaking, Lu Xing had already walked to the left side of the office. He looked at the wall in front of him and felt it for a while. He seemed to have found some mechanism. When he opened it, he saw that it was a password lock. Seeing this, Lu Xing couldn't help but frown. He said to Qin Chuan, "I didn't think there would be a password lock. You've already smashed the door. Just smash a password lock." Qin Chuan said calmly, "You can't be thinking of deciphering the password, right? This is a password lock with a self-destruct function. You can't smash it." Lu Xing's expression was a little ugly. "I made a mistake in my judgment. If we can't unlock this password lock, we can't get that weapon at all. Hearing Lu Xing's words, Qin Chuan was also a little speechless. They had worked so hard to get in and were about to get the weapon, but in the end, they were stopped by a password lock. This was too ridiculous. If you can't do it, why don't you give your director a call? Qin Chuan recommended. At a critical moment, your director won't be so inflexible. But we have lost contact with the outside world. The energy supply of the entire monitoring office has been cut off. Lu Xing smiled bitterly. We can only think of another way. Chapter 703. He's leaving just like that? Qin Chuan was not reconciled. He walked over to take a look at the combination lock and asked Lu Xing, "What's the birthday of your director?" Lu Xing shook his head with a wry smile. "I don't know. Maybe no one in the entire supervision department knows the director's birthday, because the director never celebrates his birthday and always claims to be only 18 years old." Hearing Lu Xing's words, Qin Chuan almost laughed out loud. How could there be such a weird person? Looking at the 6-digit combination lock, Qin Chuan gritted his teeth, raised his hand, and began to enter the password. He said in a deep voice, "If I can't get the weapon, I'll destroy it." Lu Xing was shocked. He wanted to stop Qin Chuan, but it was too late. At this time, Qin Chuan had quickly entered the 6-digit password. Just when Lu Xing thought that the safe would activate the self-destruction function, the door of the safe unexpectedly opened. Lu Xing's eyes widened and his mouth dropped open. His face was full of shock as he said, "You know the password?" "No, I guessed." Qin Chuan grinned. "The password I entered was 181818. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, the expression on Lu Xing's face suddenly became strange. He really did not expect that the password Qin Chuan entered would be this, and he guessed it right. "It seems that your director is very obsessed with being 18 years old." Qin Chuan grinned and looked at the things in the safe. He asked Lu Xing, "Which is the weapon you mentioned?" Lu Xing carefully took out a black box from the safe and placed it on the table beside him. He opened the lid and said to Qin Chuan, "This is it." Qin Chuan looked at the silver-white metal gloves in the box and asked with some doubts, "What is this?" "This is a Taoist instrument." Taoist instrument. Qin Chuan looked at Lu Xing in shock. He never expected that the thing that Lu Xing said could save them would be a Taoist instrument. Lu Xing said to Qin Chuan with a dignified expression, "I only know that this is a Taoist instrument. As for the specific function of this Taoist instrument, I don't know. I think you're more suitable to be its user than me." Qin Chuan heard this and took a deep look at Lu Xing. "Brother, this is a Taoist instrument. Are you sure you want me to use it?" "You are indeed the most suitable candidate. We don't have much time," Lu Xing said to Qin Chuan seriously. "I believe in your character." Qin Chuan didn't say anything else. Now was not the time to talk nonsense. He carefully took out the silver glove and put it on his right hand. However, there was no reaction. It was as if it was just an ordinary glove. Just when Qin Chuan was puzzled, Lu Xing said to Qin Chuan, "There are 3 grooves on the gloves. You need to install star stones." Under Lu Xing's reminder, Qin Chuan also found the 3 grooves on the back of the gloves. He took out 3 star stones from his storage ring and put them in the grooves. Before he could do anything, the gloves slowly flowed as if they were alive. At the same time, he felt a tingling pain in his palm, as if something had bitten him. Buzz! The gloves suddenly shone brightly and then emitted an amazing pressure. However, this pressure quickly converged and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Lu Xing looked at Qin Chuan's empty right hand and asked, "The gloves disappeared?" "No, they are invisible." Qin Chuan took a deep look at his right hand and said in a subtle tone, "This is an amazing thing." Boom! Hundreds of barbarian wolves gathered together and crazily attacked the teleportation gate, wanting to shatter it. On the other side, the cultivators of the supervision department were harassing the barbarian wolves, wanting to stop their attack. However, their strength was too weak compared to the hundreds of barbarian wolves, and they were completely useless. Damn it, without an energy supply, the energy reserve of the teleportation gate is not enough to maintain the defense system for too long. Everything will be over when the energy reserve is exhausted. Hearing this, A look of despair appeared on the faces of the people of the supervision department. If the teleportation gate was destroyed, they would lose contact with the center of the Kunlun field and become turtles in a jar. They would be at the mercy of these savage wolves. Captain, the energy reserve of the teleportation gate is only 20% left. Under such an attack, it can only last for 5 more minutes at most. At this moment, someone brought more despairing news to everyone. The energy reserve of the teleportation gate was almost depleted. As the captain, Wei Yuan felt that he should remain calm and give everyone confidence. However, he really did not know how to maintain his confidence now. Without reinforcements, all he could do was try his best and then despair. Tell all the brothers to retreat. Just as Wei Yuan was about to give the order to leave, an extremely bright meteor suddenly fell from the sky in the distance. Everyone widened their eyes when they saw this scene. How could there be a meteor in the ruins of the universe? Just as this thought popped up in everyone's minds, the meteor had already crashed into the pack of barbarian wolves that were attacking the teleportation gate. The explosion caused by the meteor's landing caused the pack of barbarian wolves to collapse almost instantly. The barbarian wolves that were at the center of the explosion were blown to smithereens. Seeing this scene, everyone could not help but be dumbfounded. Could it be that even the heavens could not bear to watch any longer, so they had specially made a move to save them? Boom! Another meteor smashed down, causing another violent explosion that turned the fleeing barbarian wolves into ash. In a short period of time, not a single one of the over 100 barbarian wolves was left alive. Such an astonishing power was simply divine punishment. Just as everyone was amazed by the power of the meteor explosion, Qin Xuan, who was in the distant sky, had a pained expression on his face. I miscalculated. If I had known that the power of this thing was so great, I would have been more gentle. Now, over 100 star stones have been blown to smithereens. Li Xing, who was standing at the side, did not know whether to laugh or cry when he heard Qin Xuan's words. To be honest, he was also shocked by the terrifying power. However, what shocked him even more was the speed at which the glove absorbed the energy of the star stones. When the 2 meteors were released, the 3 star stones that Qin Xuan had placed on the glove were completely absorbed and turned into powder. If they were to use the glove for a long battle, the consumption would probably be an astronomical figure. However, fortunately, it was not his star stones that were consumed. What was even more fortunate was that the glove had indeed saved them. Now that the teleportation gate is temporarily safe, we should go and look for the savage Wolf King. Li Xing looked at Qin Xuan and asked, "What do you think?" Qin Xuan faintly looked at Li Xing and said, "I think we should kill a few small groups to collect the star stones. What do you think?" Chapter 704. Lu Xing felt that what Qin Xuan said was very reasonable. If he suddenly ran out of star stones during the battle with the barbaric Wolf King, then it would be too embarrassing. With the assistance of the Dao artifact gloves, Qin Xuan killed the barbaric wolves as easily as chopping vegetables. In just a short moment, he killed most of the barbaric wolves that were scattered all over the place and obtained nearly 100 star stones. All right, no matter how strong the barbaric Wolf King is, I can still blast it to death with these star stones. Qin Xuan replaced the gloves with brand new star stones and then pouted his lips at Lu Xing, indicating that Lu Xing should lead the way to find the barbaric Wolf King. Lu Xing's expression was slightly grave as he said to Qin Xuan, "The barbaric Wolf King is at the entrance of the universe's ruins. There are at least a few thousand barbaric wolves there. Are you sure you're ready?" Qin Xuan grinned when he heard what Lu Xing said, revealing a mouthful of spotlessly white teeth. After that, he patted the invisible gloves on his right hand and said to Lu Xing, "As long as this fellow doesn't suddenly break, then no matter how many barbaric wolves there are, I can kill them all." With such a powerful Dao artifact by his side, the thing that Qin Xuan didn't lack the least was self-confidence. Since it's like this, then let's go. Lu Xing turned around and rushed towards the barbaric Wolf King's location with Qin Xuan following closely behind. The further the two of them went, the more barbaric wolves they encountered, and the more concentrated they became. At first, they were still able to go around them, but later on, they could only attack and kill them. It seemed that because they had killed too many barbaric wolves, they had already attracted the barbaric wolf king's attention. Suddenly, an extremely loud and clear cry resounded from afar. After hearing this cry, the barbaric wolves that were scattered all over the place seemed to have received a summons and rapidly gathered in the direction of the long cry. On top of a dilapidated ruin, a snow-white barbaric wolf that was the size of a villa stood there. Its pair of deep purple eyes sharply looked at Qinchuan, who was 10,000 meters away, and there was actually a human-like killing intent surging within its eyes. As if sensing the killing intent, Qinchuan, who was 10,000 meters away, subconsciously looked towards the barbaric wolf king's location. The man and wolf's gazes met in the air, and the powerful aura belonging to the barbaric wolf king suddenly descended in front of Qinchuan. It was like a towering mountain was pressing down on Qinchuan. In the face of this terrifying pressure, Qinchuan's face suddenly turned pale. He let out a low roar and subconsciously transformed into an azure thunder dragon, roaring towards the sky. Roar! The dragon's roar was earth-shattering, and it shattered the phantom of the barbaric wolf king. However, Qinchuan's vitality was greatly damaged because of this, and his aura weakened. Lu Xing, who was standing at the side, was shocked when he saw Qinchuan and the barbaric wolf king fighting in the air. When he saw Qinchuan's aura weaken, he became even more nervous and hurriedly asked Qinchuan, "How are you?" At this time, Qinchuan had already transformed back into his human form. He looked at the barbaric wolf king in the distance with fear in his eyes and said to Lu Xing, "I'm not this guy's opponent, even with the gloves." Although the gloves were a Dao artifact and could help Qinchuan easily kill the barbaric wolf king, Qinchuan was unable to contend against a terrifying existence like the barbaric wolf king, even with the help of the Dao artifact. According to Qinchuan's estimation, the barbaric wolf king's strength was at least on par with Huitong. Hearing Qinchuan's words, Lu Xing's face suddenly turned ugly. If they couldn't kill the barbaric wolf king, they would still die. Just as Lu Xing was thinking about this, an extremely powerful aura suddenly appeared behind them and rushed towards the barbaric wolf king at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, it flew over their heads. Feeling this familiar aura, Lu Xing was overjoyed. He said to Qinchuan excitedly, "This is the aura of the director. The director is back." Before Lu Xing's voice fell, an extremely violent collision occurred in front of them. The terrifying energy fluctuations seemed to be able to shatter the sky and sink the earth. The entire universe ruins trembled. Qinchuan looked in front of him in shock and cried out, "The late stage of the nascent soul realm." Lu Xing nodded heavily and said to Qinchuan, "The director is a member of the upper house of Kunlun's Air Center. Of course, he is at the late stage of the nascent soul realm." Qinchuan was even more shocked when he heard this. He didn't expect that the director of the supervisory department, whom he had never met, was actually a member of the upper house. When he thought about how he had taken the director's Dao artifact, Qinchuan's expression suddenly became interesting. Howl! The barbaric wolf king's angry roar came from afar. At the same time, there was a delicate shout. "Evil beast, die!" Suddenly, a huge purple ball of light appeared in the distant sky. The energy fluctuations contained in the ball of light seemed to be enough to destroy the entire universe ruins. At the same time, a pale white sword light traversed between heaven and earth like the Milky Way and suddenly pierced through the purple ball of light. Buzz! Qinchuan only felt his body tremble uncontrollably. The whole world was upside down. His consciousness was in chaos, and he had completely lost the ability to think. When he came to his senses, the world had returned to normal. It was as if everything that had happened before was just an illusion. However, Qinchuan was very clear that what had happened before was definitely not an illusion. It was real. The battle seems to be over. The director should have one. Qin Xuan looked into the distance with an extremely complicated expression. The barbaric Wolf King's aura had disappeared. It had either escaped or been killed. That barbaric Wolf King is so terrifying. I actually almost want to find him. When he thought of his ignorant behavior, Qin Xuan felt extremely lucky. If the barbaric Wolf King hadn't wanted to suppress him from afar, he would have been a dead man. We are saved. The director defeated the barbaric Wolf King. Lu Xing said to Qin Xuan excitedly, "Did you see that? That's our director." Hearing this, Qin Xuan grinned and said, "I saw it. Do you think I can leave now?" Qin Xuan had a premonition that once the director found out that he had broken the combination lock and taken the gloves, his ending wouldn't be any better than the barbaric Wolf King's. Taking advantage of the current chaos in the monitoring department to quietly slip away was the right thing to do. Hearing Qin Xuan's words, Lu Xing looked at Qin Xuan with a strange gaze and asked, "Are you sure you want to slip away?" Qin Xuan rolled his eyes and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? If I don't slip away, do you think I'll stay for dinner? Who knows, that might be my last meal." As he spoke, Qin Xuan stared at Lu Xing with vigilance and asked, "Don't tell me you want to burn the bridge after crossing the river and kidnap me to ask for credit from your director? I'm telling you, even if you beat me to death, I won't go see that old woman." Old woman? A cold snort suddenly sounded behind Qin Xuan. "Who did you just call an old woman?" Hearing this slightly familiar voice, Qin Xuan couldn't help but tremble. His face revealed an expression of seeing a ghost. On the other hand, Lu Xing's face was filled with pity. Originally, Qin Xuan's ending was probably death. Now, even if he died, his corpse would be whipped. Chapter 705. Qin Xuan was tied up and sat on the ground. He looked at the fierce woman sitting on the sofa in front of him. His face was full of flattery. Actually, it was a misunderstanding. It was all a misunderstanding. "Oh, misunderstanding?" The woman glanced at Qin Xuan faintly. Then, she lifted her round and tight thighs wrapped in black leather pants onto the table. She used the heel of her high heels to poke the silver-white gloves on the table. She asked Qin Xuan, "Is it also a misunderstanding that you stole my things?" Qin Xuan heard this and quickly explained, "I didn't steal it. I borrowed it. That's right, I borrowed it." "Oh, borrowed it?" The woman laughed and asked Qin Xuan, "Then can you return it to me now?" "Of course." Qin Xuan nodded like a chicken pecking rice. "I can give you anything you want." The woman raised her eyebrows slightly. Suddenly, she appeared in front of Qin Xuan in a flash. She bit her red lips and whispered in Qin Xuan's ear, "Then I want you. Can I?" Hearing the woman's words, Qin Xuan's face suddenly became a little interesting. Could it be that this old woman has taken a fancy to him? No way. No way. Cough, cough, that. Before Qin Xuan finished speaking, the woman had already returned to the sofa and sat down. She threw a document in front of Qin Xuan and said to Qin Xuan, "Sign this contract, and I can let you go. I can also lend you this Zeus technology glove." Qin Xuan looked at the document in front of him. His eyes focused on the three big words, slave contract. He forced a smile and asked, "What if I don't sign it?" The woman glanced at Qin Xuan and said faintly, "My name is Hua Wuying. You can go out and ask around. Who could take advantage of me and leave? If you can find one, you win." Hearing Hua Wuying's words, Qin Xuan still wanted to fight for himself. But this slave contract is too ridiculous. Hearing this, Hua Wuying smiled lightly and said to Qin Xuan, "Do you know how many people want to sign this contract but don't have a chance? I've given you a chance, so why don't you cherish it?" Qin Xuan grinned and said, "That's them, not me. Since that's the case, I'll fulfill your wish of breaking rather than bending. I'll just kill you. Untie me and bring me a pen." Hua Wuying looked playfully at Qin Xuan, who was sitting on the ground and willingly signing the contract. She teased, "Weren't you unwilling to sign it?" I didn't think it through just now." Qin Xuan coughed lightly and said to Hua Wuying, "It is my honor to be able to follow Master." Now, Qin Xuan finally understood how sure Chung felt when he forced him to to sign the soul oath. It was simply too sullen. Since that's the case, go back today and prepare well. Come to work tomorrow. Hua Wuying glanced at Qin Chuan's clothes. Go find Lu Xing later and ask him to prepare a set of decent clothes for you. Work? Qin Chuan was stunned for a moment. What work? You signed a slave contract. Didn't you read the contents properly? Hua Wuying casually threw the Zeus technology gloves to Qin Chuan. I'll let you use this first. Qin Chuan caught the gloves and read the slave contract carefully again. When he saw the stipulations in the contract, he was a little stunned. He actually became Hua Wuying's personal male secretary. After the stupefied Qin Chuan left the office in a daze, Hua Wuying slowly walked to the window and looked at the devastated land. The expression in her eyes suddenly became sharp, and there was a shocking, murderous intent surging in them. You want the Zeus technology gloves? I won't let you get what you want. Lu Xing looked at Qin Chuan, standing in front of him, and asked with envy, You really signed that document? Qin Chuan nodded helplessly. If I don't sign it, I'll die. Do you think I should sign it? You're really lucky. Not only did the director not blame you, he even gave you such a big reward. Lu Xing said with some jealousy, If this matter spreads out, I don't know how many colleagues will be jealous of you. When Qin Chuan heard this, he rolled his eyes speechlessly. What are these guys thinking? Is an indenture really that attractive? In comparison, he liked the Zeus technology glove more. Let's go. I'll take you to get a set of clothes. Under Lu Xing's lead, Qin Chuan came to the logistics department of the supervision department. Soon, Qin Chuan received a fitting suit, a windbreaker, and a pair of sunglasses for Qin Chuan. This suit and windbreaker are both top-grade magic weapons. They are impervious to water and fire. They can withstand the attacks of cultivators below the nascent soul stage several times without breaking. This pair of sunglasses is also a top-grade magic weapon. It is connected to the database of our supervision department. You can use this pair of sunglasses to look up any information you want. With your authority, 80% of the information in the database will be open to you. Hearing Lu Xing's introduction, Qin Chuan said in amazement, This outfit is not bad. As the saying goes, clothes make the man. After Qin Chuan changed into this outfit, he immediately became a handsome and somewhat cold, beautiful man. If he was in the outside world, he could definitely be an idol. This is your standard weapon. Lu Xing handed a black ring to Qin Chuan. This is a storage ring and also a positioning device. No matter where you are in danger, as long as you trigger this positioning device, the colleagues of the supervision department nearby will immediately go to rescue you after receiving the distress signal. In addition, there is a devil lock and 2 super pistols stored in it. You could drip a drop of blood on the ring, and it will recognize you as its owner. Qin Chuan took the ring and looked at it. His eyes suddenly lit up. The storage ring he was wearing now was the one he had snatched from the Iron Wolf tribe. The space was only 10 square meters, but the storage ring Lu Xing gave him now had at least 1,000 square meters of space. What other treasures do you have? Take them all out. Qin Chuan looked at Lu Xing with a smile. Don't take them one by one. Lu Xing smiled and took out a manual and handed it to Qin Chuan. He said to Qin Chuan, This is the most important thing. You must remember it. Qin Chuan looked at the manual, and his eyes lit up again. Could it be some kind of cultivation method? When he took the manual and saw the words, Habits of the Director, written on the cover, his expression suddenly became interesting. What the hell is this? As the director's personal male secretary, you should naturally have a comprehensive understanding of the director's habits. This manual will definitely help you become a qualified male secretary. Lu Xing reached out and patted Qin Chuan on the shoulder. Go back and read it well. It will definitely benefit you a lot. Qin Chuan heard this and grinned. He didn't know why he wanted to say to Lu Xing, Benefit your ass. Chapter 706. The next morning, at 6 o'clock, Qin Chuan appeared at Hua Wuying's residence on time. He prepared breakfast, desserts, and fruits for Hua Wuying. After doing all this, he sat down cross-legged on the ground and cultivated for a while. At 7 o'clock, Hua Wuying walked out of the bedroom on time. She wore a very thin and loose pajamas and slowly walked into the living room. When she saw Qin Chuan sitting cross-legged on the ground, she was slightly stunned. Then, the corner of her mouth rose, revealing a beautiful smile. She did not disturb Qin Chuan. Instead, she walked to the front of the cabinet and took out the breakfast. She sat in the living room and ate while watching Qin Chuan cultivate. After a while, Qin Chuan stopped cultivating. He slowly opened his eyes and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. He looked at Hua Wuying, who was sitting opposite him, and asked, "Are you satisfied with the breakfast?" Hearing this, Hua Wuying smiled and replied, "First, I like to drink milk with 36 degrees Celsius, but you heated it with 37 degrees Celsius. Second, I like to eat dried meat made from star beef thigh. You prepared tenderloin, right? Finally, you're my secretary. Before you speak to me, shouldn't you add a more appropriate title?" Hearing Hua Wuying's words, Qin Chuan was stunned for a moment. Then, he hesitated and said, "Then what should I call you?" Hua Wuying looked at Qin Chuan with a playful expression and asked, "What do you think?" Qin Chuan seriously thought for a moment and tentatively shouted, "Sister Hua." Hearing Qin Chuan's title, Hua Wuying's expression suddenly became very interesting. "Sister Hua? This title is suitable for Ani. How did Qin Chuan think of calling me this?" Seeing Hua Wuying's expression change, Qin Chuan immediately knew that this title was very inappropriate. So he changed it and said, "Then, I'll call you director? Boss. Then, what's the difference between you and other people?" Hua Wuying clapped her hands and said, "Forget it, just call me sister." Qin Chuan readily agreed and immediately replied, "Okay, sister." After a simple chat, Hua Wuying continued to eat her breakfast. Qin Chuan, however, said to Hua Wuying with a smile on his face, "Sister, can I ask for leave tomorrow?" Hua Wuying looked at Qin Chuan, then said with a smile, "You are the first person who wants to ask for leave on the first day of work here." Qin Chuan's face, Hua Wuying, and said, "Sister, I have no choice but to meet some friends." 3 years, Qin Chuan hadn't seen Yaorao, LVZ, and others for 3 whole years, and also hadn't heard any news about them. Now that he had escaped from the 7th prison with great difficulty, he naturally wanted to see his friends as soon as possible and report his safety. As for why he didn't use optical computer to contact them directly, that was because Qin Chuan's optical computer had been completely broken under the shield of the 7th prison, and he hadn't had time to repair it. Moreover, he wanted to personally appear in front of everyone and give them a big surprise. Those friends you're talking about should be those few people from the batch of air candidates 3 years ago. Hua Wuying put down the cup and said to Qin Chuan, "I checked your information yesterday. Your resume is good. You are an extraordinary person." For a person of Hua Wuying's status, it was very easy to investigate Qin Chuan. As long as she was willing, there was nothing in this world that could be hidden from her. Hearing Hua Wuying's words, Qin Chuan continued to ask, "Then can I ask for leave?" "Just for 1 day. No need to ask for leave. Even if you ask for leave, you won't be able to see them." Hua Wuying faintly said to Qin Chuan, "They're in the world within a world. You can't contact them at all. Even if you want to send a message to them, it's impossible." Qin Chuan somewhat curiously asked, "What kind of place is the world within a world?" "The world within a world is the transfer station of our air candidates' universe relics. From there, you could go to any undeveloped universe relics through the transmission door, but the world within a world is not a place that anyone can enter. Only the air candidates and above can enter." Hua Wuying finished speaking, then stood up and said to Qin Chuan, "As for more information, you can check it through the database. I'm going upstairs to change clothes." Qin Chuan watched Hua Wuying go upstairs, then took out the sunglasses he received yesterday and began to read the information about the world within a world. After reading the information, he couldn't help but frown and said in a low voice, "The air candidates who enter the world within a world actually have to wait at least 5 years before they can come out. This means that I won't be able to see them for at least 2 years." Just as Qin Chuan was frowning and pondering, Hua Wuying had already come down from upstairs. She was still wearing the tight leather clothes that accentuated her perfect and hot figure incisively and vividly. Qin Chuan didn't dare to look directly at her, fearing that he would be treated as a pervert and ruthlessly taught a lesson. Hua Wuying understood Qin Chuan's thoughts very well. She chuckled and said to Qin Chuan, "If you want to look, then look. Look openly. I still have some confidence in my figure." Qin Chuan heard this and grinned. A person without confidence would not wear such clothes that accentuated her figure. "Where are we going now?" Qin Chuan followed behind Hua Wuying and walked outside. He didn't know anything about Hua Wuying's schedule at all. Hua Wuying casually handed a piece of paper to Qin Chuan and replied, "This is my schedule for today." Qin Chuan heard this and immediately reached out to take the paper. When he saw the words "stroll around" written on it, he couldn't help but be stunned. This was also a schedule. On the top floor of a skyscraper in the air center, two middle-aged men stood in front of a clear window, each holding a glass of red wine in their hands. Their eyes were deep and indifferent as they looked at the stars and the universe outside. The mission failed. The undercover team didn't manage to bring back the Zeus technology gloves. Failure is expected, but we have to appease the savage Wolf King. We may have to continue working with it next time. Hua Wuying's strength is stronger than before, and it's harder to provoke her. So what? She's all alone. She can only grit her teeth and swallow her pride. It said that someone got the Zeus technology gloves from Hua Wuying's office yesterday and used it to fight with the savage wolf, stopping the savage wolf's attack on the portal. Otherwise, our plan wouldn't have failed. Have you found out who that person is? No one knows him. We're currently investigating his information everywhere. I believe there will be news soon. That person has touched the Zeus technology gloves before. Hua Wuying probably won't let him go so easily. We can send our people to contact him and inquire about the Zeus technology gloves. The conversation between the two ended here, but what they wanted to do was just the beginning. Chapter 707. Qin Chuan originally thought that Hua Wuying was just joking when she said that she was strolling around. What he did not expect was that Hua Wuying was actually strolling around. However, she was not on the ground, but in the sky where others could not see. Hua Wuying looked at the mess on the ground and looked at the people who were working on the reconstruction. She remained silent all the way. Qin Chuan could also see that Hua Wuying did not seem to be in a good mood, so he was silent all the way and silently followed behind Hua Wuying. Suddenly, Hua Wuying stopped moving forward and said to Qin Chuan in a somewhat ethereal voice, "Over the years, the supervision department has arrested many people. If it was not for the Star Beast attack yesterday, I would not have known that so many people had died in prison. Even those who are still alive are mostly crippled and do not have long to live." Hearing Hua Wuying's words, Qin Chuan was a little surprised and asked puzzledly, "Don't you know about these things?" "I know." Hua Wuying pursed her lips. "I don't know either." Hua Wuying's words were very vague, but Qin Chuan understood what Hua Wuying meant. She knew that the supervision department had arrested many people over the years, but she did not know how desperate and painful these people were in prison. Qin Chuan did not know what to say about this. If he was also put on the devil lock back then, if he was not able to survive the disaster yesterday, he would probably hate Hua Wuying to death. It was also because he did not experience the pain and despair of those people that he could face Hua Wuying calmly now. It was difficult for him to put himself in someone else's shoes if he had not experienced it. Hua Wuying turned to face Qin Chuan and asked, "Do you know how difficult it is for a woman, especially a very beautiful woman, to reach where I am today step by step?" Qin Chuan shook his head and replied, "I can't imagine. If I had not experienced it before, I would not have imagined it either." Hua Wuying sneered. "To tell you the truth, the strength and tyranny of the supervision department over the years were deliberately created by me. I wanted to use this method to tell those people in the air center not to provoke me. I am not to be trifled with. But look at the ruins on the ground. Those people did not take my warning to heart at all." Hearing Hua Wuying's words, Qin Chuan subconsciously looked at the ground. Looking at the mess on the ground, he whispered, "Why are you telling me this?" Qin Chuan was very puzzled. His relationship with Hua Wuying did not seem to be good enough for her to be honest with him. Hearing this, Hua Wuying smiled and said to Qin Chuan, "Because you will soon be targeted by those people. We are already in the same boat." Qin Chuan looked at Hua Wuying in astonishment and asked in confusion, "Why?" "Because you're now the owner of the Zeus technology gloves." Hua Wuying looked deeply at Qin Chuan. "Why do you think yesterday's attack happened?" Hearing Hua Wuying's reminder, Qin Chuan was shocked and said involuntarily, "Those people came for the Zeus technology gloves?" Qin Chuan never thought that yesterday's Star Beast attack was actually because of the Zeus technology gloves that had already fallen into his hands. Hua Wuying lent the gloves to him. Wasn't that the same as throwing a hot potato to him? Looking at the shocked expression on Qin Chuan's face, Hua Wuying smiled and asked, "Do you know how long it takes for a magic weapon to transform into a Dao tool?" Qin Chuan, who was still in shock, heard Hua Wuying's question and came back to his senses. He subconsciously asked, "How long does it take?" According to statistics, since ancient times until now, a total of 129 Dao tools have appeared in this world. Among them, the magic weapon that took the shortest time to transform into a Dao tool was Sword God Su Inha's sword. It took nearly 70 years. The longest time was 430 years. Hearing Hua Wuying's words, Qin Chuan asked curiously, "What about the Zeus technology gloves?" Hua Wuying looked deeply at Qin Chuan and replied, "The Zeus technology gloves are a product of technology. From the moment of its birth, it was a Dao tool. It only took 3 years from the research and development to the birth of the Zeus technology gloves." Qin Chuan's eyes immediately widened when he heard this. The Zeus technology gloves were actually a product of technology, and it only took 3 years to create it. Wasn't this a little too shocking? Are you surprised? But this is the truth. Hua Wuying chuckled. The appearance of the Zeus technology gloves means that we can mass-produce Dao tools in a short period of time. Do you know what this means? This means that as long as you master this technology, you can quickly arm an entire army. Can you imagine the scene of thousands of people using Dao tools to fight at the same time? Qin Chuan thought of how he used the Zeus technology gloves to summon a meteor with a wave of his hand yesterday. If there were thousands of people waving their hands to summon meteors at the same time, it's too terrifying. Qin Chuan shuddered. This is like commanding thousands of nascent soul stage cultivators to fight at the same time. No one could stop them. Even a peak nascent soul stage cultivator could not withstand the indiscriminate bombardment of thousands of early nascent soul stage cultivators. You're right, no one could stop them. Hua Wuying looked at Qin Chuan meaningfully. So this is the reason why those people want to get the Zeus technology gloves. Qin Chuan looked at Hua Wuying with great confusion and asked, "Why do you want me to keep such an important thing?" Hua Wuying smiled slightly and said to Qin Chuan, "Because I'm really annoyed by those guys. I want them to change their target." Hearing Hua Wuying's words, Qin Chuan's expression suddenly became interesting. "This is simply too deceptive. But you don't have to worry. As my personal male secretary, you will usually be by my side. If those people want to make a move on you, they can only choose to do it when you are alone. So, do you still want to ask for leave now?" Hua Wuying looked at Qin Chuan with a smile. "I can give you a day off now." Qin Chuan shook his head like a rattle drum. What a joke. Asking for leave now is no different than sending a sheep to the tiger's mouth. "That, sister, can I return the gloves to you?" Qin Chuan looked helpless. "This thing is too precious. If I lose it, I can't afford to pay for it." "It doesn't matter. If you lose it, you will pay with your life." Hua Wuying chuckled. "The Zeus technology gloves have already recognized you as its owner. If those people want to get the gloves, they will have to kill you first. So, if the gloves are still with you, you will still be there. If the gloves are gone, you will also be gone." Qin Chuan smiled bitterly and asked Hua Wuying, "Sister, how did this hot potato end up in your hands?" Hua Wuying looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle gaze and replied, "Because this is something my father made." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.